on some channels. He's on Newsmax tonight. He'll also be on CNN later tonight. So you got me for today. But first things first, folks, if we get into anything else, happy Meatloaf Monday.
I think I'll try the meatloaf sandwich.
Do you know what that is?
Yes, meatloaf.
What is it? I'm only asking in case I have to describe it later to a doctor.
Look, it's nutritious. It's delicious.
Made out of meat. Add ketchup if you want. I couldn't care less.
That's right. Happy Meatloaf Monday, everybody. And like I said, Phil will be on Newsmax tonight at 6:20 and 7 o'clock. He'll be doing a solo part. I believe the 621 is solo, and then he'll be on a panel. And then he'll be going on CNN. If you guys know Scott Jennings on CNN, he's on this panel on the show by Abby Phillip, and he is normally the only conservative on this panel. So Phil will be outnumbered, you could say, on CNN today or tonight. So make sure to go check it out. And tomorrow, Jeff Poor will be having the show. But today, Phil will actually be calling in at 2:30 to discuss some things with me. We got a lot of big stuff in the news, like the Autopen scandal, which is ramping up, and it's getting crazier by the second. But then at 3 o'clock, and then to the end of the show, Emily Hayes from the Dale Jackson Show will be joining me to discuss the news of the day as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. So we got a great show for you today. And first, although Phil is gone, the monologues don't stop. So I wrote up a monologue for today's show. The monologue, as always, is sponsored by attorney Stan McDonald, and I will tell you more about Stan on the other side of this monologue. All right, so this past week, the news headlines have been dominated by one name, the guy who never dies, according to President Trump, and his name is Jeffrey Epstein. And yes, I'm going to go there. So after months of Pam Bondi going on Fox News, claiming that she's got the files on her desk to review and that they're frivolously sifting through them to have eventually released it to the public, so we were told. After months of being dragged along, and after being promised during the campaign that these files would be released to the public, the DOJ then released a memo claiming that there actually was no client list and no evidence suggesting he was running any blackmail operation. And yep, that's right. On a Sunday night, the DOJ releases this unsigned memo to Axios, of all places, and then expects us all to just, move on simply because we were told to do so. Nothing here, ladies and gentlemen. You can all just move right along, case closed. I'm sorry. That just sucks. Do you think I'm that stupid? Do you think the American people are that stupid? This Epstein situation could not have been handled any worse, in my opinion. But to be honest, this is exactly what we should expect from government, no matter who's in charge, over-promising and under-delivering every single time. And now I understand this is a nuanced topic. A lot of commentators are missing the mark on what we should be upset about and to whom the blame should be laid upon. But most importantly, I'm going to tell you why we should care about this story. But first, let me tell you who I think is responsible for this whole mess. And I believe the blame from the DOJ perspective should lie on one person, and that person's Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi was on Fox News every other week, it seemed, dragging everyone along on Epstein. It's on my desk right now, she said. We just got a truckload of evidence, she said. Y'all be getting everything besides the graphic evidence that shouldn't be out there, she said. Now, I firmly believe that Pam Bondi was claiming to have evidence that wasn't there in the first place. If there was any incriminating evidence on powerful elites that were being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein, I'm sure they would have been long gone by now. I mean, we saw firsthand that one FBI office in New York got caught shredding Epstein evidence shortly after President Trump started his second term. So there was a lot of time between Epstein, dying and then today. A lot of time for evidence to be destroyed or simply didn't exist in the first place. I don't think Pam Bondi intentionally misled the public on Epstein, but I think flat out she misled the public on what she was reviewing and what they were going to reveal for everybody to see, period. Dan Bongino, deputy director of the FBI, was apparently even threatening to resign if Pam Bondi wasn't removed. Allegedly, he got into a shouting match with Bondi and Susie Wiles, who is the White House chief of staff, during a meeting last Wednesday over this. And then he took last Friday off. Now, Trump claims to have talked to him over the weekend, and everything is fine now, apparently, and I truly hope so. I do not want to see Dan Bongino leave his position. I think we need more Dan Bonginos in positions like he is right now. But I think he and Kash Patel have every right to be furious over this. Those are two guys with extreme integrity, and have both left a lot to be in the positions they are now. They do not deserve to be made to look like they're covering up for a pedophile like Epstein because their boss, Pam Bondi, simply overpromised and over-exaggerated what they had in the first place. If there's anyone who ought to be the scapegoat here, I believe it should be Pam Bondi. Now, on the suicide issue, I can be convinced that he took his own life with the predicament that he was in, but now it's come out that the camera footage outside of his cell that was released to prove he wasn't murdered was not only edited with 2 separate clips, but it actually was exported 4 separate times. Yeah, not suspicious at all, you guys. Now, I didn't expect the government to tell me that Jeffrey Epstein was running a blackmail operation on powerful elites. I mean, it would have been nice if they had such evidence and presented it, but I really didn't expect that. What I do expect is for you to release what you do have. And no, for the love of God, don't release any graphic evidence with kids. No one wants to see that. But you expect me to believe that's all the evidence that you have? I mean, come on. Release what you have. Let us figure it out from there. That's all we expect from you as government. I mean, after all, that's exactly what we were promised. I'll admit that any evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was, blackmailing politicians and working for an intel agency with, that was all circumstantial. So I'm not expecting a notarized document saying exactly that. But I'm a free thinker and can decide for myself after seeing all of the evidence once it's presented to me. But the DOJ specifically said there's no evidence he ran a blackmail operation and had a client list. I mean, case closed. They didn't say there's no other evidence than graphic footage that we can release. They were specific on the fact there was no blackmail op and client list, which again, I'm not saying they have those things, but it's almost like someone was holding a gun to their head of whoever wrote that memo. That's right. Tell them there's nothing to see here. I don't understand the theater behind all of this. Go through, remove all the graphic evidence, and then release all of the rest. What's the need for all the yapping about it? But here's what I am insulted by. The response to the outcry over this memo has honestly been infuriating. Shut up. Nobody cares about Jeffrey Epstein. Stop talking about him. President Trump himself chastised a journalist for simply asking what the heck is up with that memo. He then released an entire paragraph on Truth Social telling everyone to move on, which, if you go look at the comments, this really wasn't well received from MAGA, to say the least. And I voted for President Trump. I support him fully and what he's doing to make this country great again. But as a citizen, a taxpayer, and someone who cares if my government has evidence on a prolific sex trafficker and is perhaps covering something up here, the way this administration has handled all of this is just simply wrong. It's bizarre, it's insulting, and we deserve answers. This story isn't going away. I'm 22 years old. I'm part of the conservative Gen Z movement, and I'll just tell you, young conservatives are pissed about this. Charlie Kirk held an event for his Turning Point USA organization over this past weekend, which is an organization specifically geared towards Gen Z conservatives. And the overwhelming consensus at this event was that they are not happy about how this was handled. It's just another example in our eyes of government and elites getting away with whatever they want, and then anyone who asks questions is the bad guy. We voted against that, actually, that exactly. This is how the left operates. They piss down your leg, they tell you it's raining, and then they chastise you for daring to ask any questions. Like we're the criminals. Excuse me, but we're not the ones who ran the sex trafficking ring. We're the ones who were promised that they would release all the files. So don't get mad at us when we're a little bit perplexed as to why this hasn't happened. But bottom line, this isn't a good look at all. And I'd really worry about the midterms over something like this. This story may fade away in the headlines eventually, and people will find some other story to latch onto. But the demographic of voters who voted for transparency and against the establishment, who see this as a blatant cover-up, they'll remember this. And detach yourself for a second from your own opinions, on the matter. President Trump won this past November largely in part because of these voters. The voters who are independent leaning, who saw Trump as an answer to the authoritarian left, they feel robbed, lied to, and insulted. And they will not vote Republican in 2026. I'm not one of those people. I'm a true through and through conservative who supports President Trump and his agenda. And I'm not going to jump ship over this exactly, although I'm upset about how this was handled from, Pam Bondi and the DOJ as a whole. But the people who will jump ship over this are out there. And I don't think that group of voters should be, underestimated or looked over. They exist and they're important. And this could come back to bite the GOP, in my opinion. But I'll wrap up with this. Like I said, I trust President Trump on doing what it takes to save America like he has been so far. But I'll be honest, this wasn't a good look. And it's important for all of us to call out things we don't like when our government underdelivers on their promises. Because if we're not allowed to do so, we're not free citizens, we are slaves. And that is a wrap for the Right Side Way. Yeah, let me know y'all's thoughts on this whole Epstein, stuff. It was big in the news because of the reports that Dan Bongino was going to resign. It looks like that's not the case anymore, thank God. But now, the story's still out there. It may move on, soon. Another story will come up. But I do think it's important to recap. How do we think this was handled? This is JP here, filling in for Phil on Right Side Radio. We'll be right back.
We did have we had the same connectivity, and we had the same comms blackouts if we lost somebody. And I'll never forget, I had a special phone because I did a lot of interconnectivity on my second tour in Baghdad, and we had Sadr City and parts of Rasafa district. And
when were you in Sadr City?
04.
Okay, all right, yes.
But and it was a mess.
Oh,
we lost
man.
some good guys, but we had one particular day where it was a coordinated ambush. We had IED strikes followed by small arms and RPGs that took out 3 of our guys. And so the comms blackout went in. Well, my wife, the phone that I carried had the ability to call in. And I told her, I said, don't ever call in, hon, unless it's an emergency. If I call you, we'll talk, but don't call me. But if it's an emergency, just know you can. Well, she called that night because she's literally watching the news, looking at patches on the shoulder and realizing, oh my gosh, I think I know where that is. And I think that's Phil's unit. And she called me that night. Oh, it was a rough one.
Yeah.
But it's hard for the wife sometimes being back.
Oh yeah,
home.
well, you got to think you're the one. You're not in the know. You're not in the know, but you're together. It says that's why Scripture tells us that the man leaves his parents so the two can become one flesh. So you join, you become one flesh, and we're a family. We are, I still have my mom and dad, still respect my mom and dad, but now I am the headship of this, and she is part of that, and we're one flesh. And when you go on these deployments, these wartime deployments, you're pulled apart, and she's living in the unknown all the time. Now, you know what's going on, right? And you're doing it. So that takes a strong person, not just a strong woman, just a strong person in general. When I say person, because you got kids that deal with the same thing too. They're part of that unit, that family unit. I don't say team for family. My wife likes saying team, and I'm like, no, family's not a team. A family's a family, which in my opinion is different than a team. I was a team guy for my entire career. That's what they call us. That's our nicknames, team guys. I know what a team is like. A family's not like a team. It's even deeper. It's more. It's a deeper rooted thing than a team. And a team is pretty deep. We can agree on that. Your family is one level deeper, and that's why we're born into the family of Christ. We're part of God's family in the person of Jesus Christ. It's more than a team. We're not teamed up with Christ. We're in His family. And so I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Let me ask you, let me segue off that, though. I'm going to chase a rabbit again. So you're a team guy.
Yeah.
And now you got a family, and God saw fit to make sure you had all girls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you come from team guy, law enforcement, doing all the alpha male stuff, and yet you go home and you are so outnumbered right now.
Yeah, man. Well, I got a buddy he's got daughters too. He said it just means I was man enough to blow the balls off of them. That's what he always says. So, sorry for the ladies that listen to this, but I always think it's funny. No, man, I wouldn't trade those girls for anything. It is different. Love my wife, have my wife, but those girls,
How old are they roughly?
9, 6, and 3.
Awesome.
So yeah, we got 9, 6, and 3, and
girls are hard too.
They're hard.
You wait, man, they're gonna be teenagers.
What I've learned, I think, in my brothers, my brothers have sons, and they also have daughters. So I got nieces and nephews. We have more girls than boys in our family, the grandkids side. So all the cousins, we all get together. It's all girls, and just 4 boys now but there's a baby. He's Bennett is a little over a year. I think he's 18 months. So I say that to say those boys, I've noticed that they're destructive, but they're actually easier as children, is what we notice. I say they're easier as children. They're harder as little children because they're destructive than girls, because girls are not as destructive. But what I've seen now, looking at the teenage side of it, boys just kind of stay the same. You kind of know what you're getting. Yeah, they might be destructive, but boys are just kind of the same all the way through it. Those girls, they shift. There is a shift, and the drama comes in, and I'm already seeing it with a 9-year-old. I can't imagine, the teenage years. I mean, her and my wife fighting over like how our hair is going to be done or clothes, The 3-year-old fighting over shoes. This is what girls do. What I've learned about girls, I actually asked ChatGPT this. I said, why do girls...
You went to the Oracle.
I went to the Oracle, ChatGPT. Why do girls always leave the drawers open? And ChatGPT, is that something in your house?
Yeah.
Dude, I am going to have a panic attack over drawers and cabinets in the house. It's pure laziness, I think, is what it is. A lack of discipline and laziness.
I refuse to affirm or deny anything that you just said.
But it's just like a clutter bomb. I would almost rather stuff just be destroyed. It's just like a clutter bomb of mess, all this little knick-knack crap everywhere, drawers open. That, to me, that's what drives me up a wall, right? And it's not just it's my wife and all of my daughters. So I got
but
four women
wait
to do it.
until she's 14 and the boy comes around.
Oh yeah, I don't even want. I'm not even thinking.
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. Yeah, that's right, folks. Phil is out today. He is up in New York City, being courted by Newsmax and CNN. That's right. Phil will be on Newsmax tonight, 6:20 and 7 o'clock on a panel and solo. And then he will be in the Scott Jennings seat on CNN tonight with all the other liberals on that panel. So I'm looking to see some good Phil sound bites today as he's trying to bring some common sense to the liberals on CNN. And he'll actually be calling in at 2:30 to talk about this Autopen scandal. We're going to get into that next. I don't know if you've seen, but a lot more evidence from the New York Times, of all places, has come out that Joe Biden did not individually authorize all of the pardons. And it's something that we all expected, but now that we're seeing the evidence come to light, something needs to be done about it. But first, before I get too far down anything, folks, Stan McDonald, and we're going to see how I do on this disclaimer at the end of this, but attorney Stan McDonald is a 30-year practicing veteran in the law. Is a 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. Not only will Stan advocate and fight for your legal needs and rights, but he has been an absolute warrior for causes near and dear to our Rightside ruffian community. Stan McDonald, he's represented clients in literally thousands of real estate transactions over the years, and Stan McDonald knows how to represent you in court in front of federal, state, and local decision makers. Where Stan McDonald is on your side, you'll have no greater friend, and likewise, your adversaries will have no greater foe. So attorney Stan McDonald at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee, here's his phone number, 256-479-3020. That's Stan McDonald, 256-479-3020. Tell him you heard about it on Rightside Radio. All right, it's disclaimer time. Ready? No presentation made as quality of service and performance greater than quality of service performed by other lawyers. Wow. I think I got better than last time, but that was still pretty bad. I don't know. I gave myself like a 6 maybe on that one. Stupid disclaimers anyways. Lawyers getting involved with stuff. But let's see your text messages, folks. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Let us know your thoughts on how this Epstein stuff was handled. TL from Huntsville, great monologue, JP, thank you. So we can and should demand the truth, and they won't be able to hide forever. Luke 8:17, for there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought into the open. They can tell the truth about Epstein without hurting the victims, but in the meantime, they're hurting their credibility. I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you, is another quote. Yep, that's not much else to add there, TL. Appreciate you. Karen R. from Rogersville said, awesome monologue, JP. Thank you. Said, I totally agree. Not a good handling. Yeah. And I'm on Trump's team on this. And like I said, I don't think they're intentionally hiding anything. I don't think the evidence was there in the first place. And that's why I put a lot of blame on Pam Bondi, because I think she got everybody ready for this grand unveiling of all this evidence that was going to show a lot where she didn't really have it in the first place. And now it looks like the Trump administration is hiding things. So I don't think she handled it correctly. But also I'll say, like I said in the monologue, the chastising of people who are upset about this is not a great look. And I don't think it's going to help this be any better. It's just, I don't know. It could have been handled a lot better. Just don't chastise the people for asking questions on stuff they were promised. And I think Pam Bondi over-promising in the first place is what led to this. So, hopefully, like I said, it looks like Dan Bongino has, calm down and come back, and he's ready to move on, which I hope so. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see how long this story stays in the headlines. Dave from Capshaw, good monologue, JP. Appreciate it. Glad to hear Bongino and Patel seem to be teaching the long view of politics and not jumping ship over this issue. Yep, I completely agree. We got Jeff from Indiana. JP, all this does is feed conspiracy theories, which usually might have some truth to them. Someone with enormous power has scared Donald Trump, even though he's the leader of the free world. Somebody was powerful enough to have Epstein killed, which is obvious to anyone with common sense. I support Trump, but I think he's afraid of whoever is behind this for whatever reason. Who knows? I'm of the belief they don't have it in the first place. And I think they were put between a rock and a hard place. And, because of Pam Bondi overpromising so much, this is the position we're in. I don't think Trump is playing some 40 chess of like, we're not going to release this so that we can have leverage over somebody. I don't think they have it in the first place. But like I said, could have been handled better from top to bottom. Fritzy from Huntsville said, good job. I'm with you. I just want to see all the evidence and I'll come to my own conclusions. Yep, I agree. John from Huntsville says, JP, I loved your enthusiasm in today's monologue. Thank you. But I can honestly care less about Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Okay. I'd rather talk about tonight's home run derby and how your Braves replaced their best home run hitter. Listen, Acuna's hurt apparently, so we'll see if Matt Olson can do any better, but I'm kind of in a mode of I don't even want to talk about baseball because my team sucks, so we'll see. Cameron from Decatur says, I just have to believe that the administration has a reason and a plan and a strategy for withholding the information. I'm sure that the information will come out when it can be of the most advantage. We'll see. I don't know. I don't think they have it. Like I say again, it's unfortunate. Evidence probably was destroyed, and like I said, there was a lot of time between Epstein dying and now. It's been 6 years. Should have been released long before now, and it probably shouldn't have been destroyed. If you're destroying evidence of Epstein, what does that say of you? And I also don't believe, by the way, that Trump is in the Epstein. I believe that would have been released by the Democrats if there were, they did have that evidence. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. But then again, I just fall back on, don't think that was there in the first place. And, Pam Bondi, if there's going to be anybody to point the finger at, I think it's her. But we'll see. And hopefully if, we come down the road and, they find some evidence that they can release to the public that doesn't involve, graphic, stuff that's going to hurt victims, and by all means, please release it. But I think if they had that evidence, I think Cash and Dan, them specifically, have the integrity to release it. It's just, I don't know. It's unfortunate that it's looking like the Trump administration is covering up for something, which I don't think they are, but it may hurt us in the midterms because of that and the impression that it's, putting out in the public. And I think chastising people who are asking questions only feeds that criticism and skepticism even more. So I think it's important to just, Pam Bondi should have told the truth at the beginning. We'll review what we have, but can't promise anything, and we'll see if we have anything that we can release. We'll release it, but we'll see what we have. Unfortunately, she specifically said there was a client list on her desk when there wasn't. That puts us in the position we are now. But hopefully, Trump can move on from this, and he can recoup the image of the administration going into the midterms. We'll just have to wait and see on that. All right, on the other side, folks, Phil is going to call in from New York City. We're going to talk about some Autopen stuff and all the new evidence that's come out. So make sure to stay tuned for that. This is Rightside Radio with JP filling in. We'll be right back.
My daughter, who's grown and married now, my daughter, I'll never forget, one of her first boyfriends. So my dad, career Army, highly decorated, 2 tours in Vietnam. My granddad, career general officer when he retired, the whole thing. So the kid comes over to meet the family. Granddad comes in. My dad, who was probably less sensitive than me in many ways and some of this stuff, he's passed away now. Agent Orange finally caught up with him. But Dad walks in, looks at him and goes, oh, look, are you the guy? And we apparently have a father and a grandfather, both trained to kill. How do you like that? Yeah, that was his introduction to the family. Yeah. But let me ask you this too. Being a team guy, did you ever have that moment where you came home and you're like in team guy, because you're like living in a locker room for a year on deployment. Yeah. I mean, you go over there and it's all rough cut humor and maybe crass talk and things. And then you walk back in the house and it's the wife and 3 little girls. Yeah. And do you have to retool yourself?
I won't say you retool yourself. You just flip a switch on or off. I can be more like me in front of my wife, than and that's okay. She just gets mad at me, she'll get mad at me for saying certain things. But as far as the girls, yeah, no, it's definitely it's definitely a shift because one, because of their age, right?
Yeah.
There is an age thing, and I get that. But two, because they are girls, you know, and so it's just a switch you flip on or off. Like one of my, I don't know why, but the little one, I don't know who she heard it from one of her cousins, but she started calling everybody like the word that she used. She calls them a fartism. I don't know what a fartism is. I don't know, but she heard it from one of her cousins, I think, or maybe her older sister. She calls everybody a fartism. I said, hey, little girls don't use the word fart. And my older daughter, she says, I've heard you say it, Daddy. And I say, yeah, I've said it. And I said, but it's different for boys and girls. And my wife said, it's the same for anybody. I said, okay, I'm going to stop you because you're wrong. I said, can a little boy hit any little girl? No. All the girls. And I said, now, what about little girls? Do they hit little boys? You go, yes, we can. Mom was like, no, you don't hit little boys neither. But I said, but you see, we view it as different. Just as society views a little boy hitting a little girl or a man hitting a woman is different, society views what comes out of a young lady's mouth different than what comes out of a young man's mouth. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, but it's the reality of what is. And it's a scriptural principle. It says, abstain from the appearance of evil. And for a young woman, abstaining from the appearance of evil, my wife could punch me in the eye and nobody would care. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I'm saying as a law enforcement officer. Because honestly, she might black my eye. A buddy of mine, him and his wife got in a fight, and he came to work. I was actually just training with him the other day. He's going back to the agency to do some stuff, but we're at in the SEAL teams, and he come to work with a little bit of a black eye and a little cut right here. And we're like, what happened to you? He said, bro, me and my wife got in a fight, and he said, I said something. And he said, she just punched me in the eye. I just started laughing, you know, and it was funny. Right? We laugh at that. But if he had punched her, if he had hit her, he probably would have broke her orbital. I mean, he could have actually. I mean, there's a good chance that if
he probably would have been off the team too.
Oh no, not off the team. He'd been in jail. There'd been a whole process. But what I'm saying is, there's a level of difference because he can actually physically hurt her really bad. I don't care who the chick is out there. There are very few chicks. You might have a few that like are fight trained or whatever, but most chicks hit a dude. Yeah, you might hurt me a little bit, but you need an object to be an equalizer.
Yeah.
Most dudes hit a chick, you're gonna hurt them really bad. So I say all that to say it is different, and it's viewed differently for that reason. We view a guy that hits a girl is extremely bad, and a girl that hits a guy we don't think much of. We don't think much about. You view a guy that has a bad mouth, we might be like, I don't like hanging around that guy because all he does is talk bad.
Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back. This is Rightside Radio. Producer JP filling in today while Phil is making the rounds up in New York City. Going to be appearing on CNN tonight. Going to be very outnumbered on that panel of his, I'm sure. But I know he's ready for it and excited for it, and I'm as well to watch that. But speaking of Phil, we actually have Phil on the phone right now, calling in from New York City to discuss some things. So, Phil, well, first, I know you're in New York City. Are you okay? Are you safe? Are you hurt? We need to do a wellness check on you. Are you all safe?
You're good, man. I'm sitting here in the hotel room eating Fig Newtons and getting ready for the big event tonight.
Awesome. Well, a city that's about to elect Zoran Mamdani, it seems, you can never be too sure on the state of things up there. So I'm glad you're safe. But speaking of which, are you excited to go on CNN tonight? Are you ready to be outnumbered by all the liberals on that show? This is the Scott Jennings show, so I'm sure you'll get some good soundbite opportunities on there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a hoot, man. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm honored they're having me up here. I am. I'm sitting in Midtown Manhattan right now. I head over to the CNN studios later this evening. But it's the news night, CNN News Night with host Abby Phillips is the show, and this is the one that Scott Jennings is on quite a bit, and they're usually mix it up. Like I'll have two conservative or two Republicans and two Democrats. I know that one of the guests tonight with me is a member of the ladies on The View. Anna Navarro is going to be on the show with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I got another guy named, I forgot what his name. He used to work for Ben Carson. Shermichael. I forgot his last name right now, but he's a great guy. He's very conservative. and then another guy who's like a moderate Republican named Brad Palumbo. So it's going to be interesting. But I'm looking forward to it.
Have they prepped you beforehand on any topics they're going to talk about, or is it just you show up and go with the flow?
Well, allegedly, somewhere around, I don't know, another hour from now, I'm going to get an email telling me what they expect the topics to be on, but I'm always supposed to be ready for news of the day in case something breaks. But I've spent the morning, just like I do for Rightside Radio, I spent the morning going through all the latest headlines, getting my thoughts together on things, and I really anticipate that the stuff tonight on the show on CNN is going to be exactly what you and I'd be talking about if I were there. Well, we're going to talk about it in a minute anyway. Things like the Autopen scandal and what just happened with Russia today, and the Epstein files, all the above. So I think it's pretty much predictable what it's going to be about.
Well, speaking of which, I actually was going to ask you your thoughts on the Autopen, because New York Times New York Times of all places has come out and provided some more evidence that Biden did not individually, prove each pardon, and that staffers were kind of given the authority to use the Autopen to their discretion, and which is something that I'm not shocked by. We kind of all anticipated that, but it is shocking to see it kind of, in on paper evidence. And we've already seen Rand Paul is now, going after Fauci again, because he claims, well, the pardon is null and void if Biden didn't approve it himself. But what are your initial thoughts now, seeing the New York Times is saying what we've all known all along?
Yeah, I think there's several stories in one here. The fact that the New York Times did it is significant. Their story number one. This is sort of like CNN's Jake Tapper writing the expose book on what happened inside the inside the scenes there at the White House about Biden's dementia. I really think that what you're looking at right now is the liberal media has realized the only way in the world to remain relevant is to sort of begin acting like they didn't realize what was happening, and to now try and change the narrative to prove that they're really still a news source. That's story number one. The New York Times being the one who did this, but it was actually a really good story. I retweeted it this morning myself. The whole thing here is it's just galling. I mean, I look at it, and jump in here when you want to. I'm going to get going. I know I am, but this thing is just really irritating. Let's take it just on the pardons issue. I mean, at one point, Biden, we know for a fact he was out of the country when at least 6 or 7 of these pardons were auto-penned, meaning did he even know it happened? Another time, he's pardoning his entire family, General Milley, Fauci, the January 6th Commission, all people who've not even been investigated, much less indicted. He's like doing preemptive pardons. And then you get the whole thing about doing thousands in one day. He even commuted the sentences of everybody on death row in federal prison. and you gotta look at this and go, come on, man. This is supposed to be a case-by-case basis. What's the rational basis for saying this is okay? And there's not one. This was just a bunch of agenda-driven, laissez-faire abuse of the Office of the Presidency staffers, who I think this is my opinion, I think this is going to wind up being bigger than Watergate.
Yeah. Well, and so the story is that, Biden gave his staffers like guidelines to follow and then let them have it. But then apparently the staffers changed the guidelines after he signed it in the first place. So the guidelines that they were going by weren't even approved by Biden in the first place. So Biden gave them, guidelines, and then they changed the guidelines and then used the Autopen. Like that even if Biden's trying to say that, he's good because he gave them the guidelines to follow and approve that. Not only did he not individually, sign each pardon and approve it, but then the guidelines he originally gave were changed. So, Fauci's pardon getting signed at 10 o'clock at night from some random staffer, I don't even remember his name. It's in the New York Times article. And that's just, in my opinion, this needs to be investigated right now. And I think all pardons should be null and void. If Biden didn't approve them individually and sign them individually, then the pardons should be null and void completely.
Well, I agree. And I think what's going to wind up having to happen here, a couple of thoughts on this is I think there needs to be a referral to the Department of Justice, if there hasn't already been one, and setting up a special investigation, a special prosecutor potentially, to actually investigate this as a crime. And I think what we're going to wind up having to have, JP, I think we're going to wind up having to have the U.S. Supreme Court weigh in as to whether or not these things are constitutionally grounded. Did they meet the standards set for the Office of the Presidency and the authority there? There's an old saying that you can delegate your authority, but you can't delegate your responsibility. And I would say that in this case, Biden didn't just delegate some authority to a staffer to do it. He didn't know who was doing it. He didn't have any idea it was being done. He didn't know what names were being. It's one thing for him to say, hey, I'm about to leave. I got to get on Marine One real quick. That one that we're going to have to do, go ahead and put my signature on that one. But to just have a meeting one day and go, I don't care who you do, just get her done.
Mm-hmm.
That's abdicating all responsibility. And I really believe that flies in the face of the constitutional provisions of what the powers of the presidency really are.
Well, and it's not just the pardons. I think that's an indicator on how the entire presidency was run. Like if Biden was so out of it that he can't even sign individual pardons, I think him giving his staffers approval was just par for the course on how the whole presidency was run. Like, you go handle it. Yeah, I trust you. Use the Autopen, whatever. And then I'll go, watch, some random show and take nap time at 4 p.m. or something. Like, I think that's how the entire presidency was run. So it's not just the pardons. I think the pardons are an indicator of a larger scale thing. And I do think it's a big scandal. I think the left trying to downplay it as, let's just move on from Biden. It's like, no, we've got 4 years of a president that apparently was being run by staffers. And that needs to be, people need to be held accountable for that, especially the staffers that willingly went along and knew that it was wrong. I think they need to be held accountable just as much as, people like Fauci, whose pardons are null and void. Do you think we're going to get that anytime soon, though? Or is, this unfortunately just kind of going to go away soon?
Well, I mean, it depends on what soon is. Soon will never be met. The standard for soon will never be met on social media, but the standard for soon in the justice system is going to be, there's going to be more time involved. I mean, keep in mind, Trump's only been in office for 150 days.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still digging this thing out right now. And there's no telling what documents were burned or shredded. So we'll have to figure some of this out. But when you see the first one of these staffers capitulate and feel like that they're going to have to be a whistleblower to protect their own self from having to go to jail, then I think you're going to see the chips begin to fall. And it's going to be like one domino after another. It's going to be ugly. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the military I had to do what's called a 15-6 investigation. Every time you do it, you start off with one thing, you find five. And I think that's what's going to happen. And these are not serious people. They're just really not. I mean, the way they ran that office, here's part of the problem. And you kind of touched on this. These folks had a complete disregard for the sacredness,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, of the office of the presidency of the United States. It is a sacred thing. It is a much vaunted, hallowed thing. It's a deep honor to be there. And I think they just saw it as that job they went to, and nobody will care, and we'll do our thing, and it'll be awesome. But I remember when, and I'll say this real quick, and I'll let you back in, but I remember when George W. Bush was in office, I heard that he had such a deep respect for the Oval Office that if he got back to the living quarters of the presidency and realized he'd forgotten something, he would put his coat and tie back on before he walked into that office because he revered it so much.
Yeah.
And we did not have that in the Biden administration.
No. I mean, there was staffers who, like I said, they clearly didn't have that respect to the office. If you're signing, pardons and you're changing the guidelines without even consulting the president, that shows a lack of respect for the president and the office. And they were completely entitled. I think that's what that shows. And they were given the reins on things they should have never had to begin with. I just hope there's a day of reckoning. And I agree with you. It's probably not going to be like tomorrow, even though we'd like for it to be. But I do hope that day of reckoning comes. One more question, Matt, before I let you go. And you mentioned it earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if you get asked this tonight on CNN. But this Russia story of Trump saying he's giving Russia 50 days and he's going to impose 100% sanctions on them if they don't come to a peace treaty. And then also, I think this is genius. He's selling weapons to NATO for them to then give it to Ukraine, and it's not costing the U.S. taxpayer anything. I think that is a genius move by President Trump. What do you think on how Trump is handling this Ukraine-Russia situation right now?
Yeah, I really do. I agree with that completely. This is brinksmanship. This is gamesmanship. This is statesmanship. And what you're watching right now is a president who understands how to pursue the ends. And right now, the end is still peace. I mean, he's not saying, I want war. He's saying, I want peace. And by God, we're going to get it. And I think Putin's about to fool around and find out. I mean, he literally has gone Putin has gone too far, I think, in terms of trying to invest himself in what he believes his legacy is. Really thought that he'd be able to get this done before Biden left office, and he couldn't. And now the deal with Putin is his ego, his personality is still struggling to deal with the fact that what was supposed to be a 4-day war is now over 1,200 days long. And so for this to happen and is a clear indication that Trump has had it with Putin, and that he's had it, and he's stepping into the next phase of that DIME acronym that I talk about so often: diplomacy, intelligence, military, economics, all of it. He's putting the next thing on the table, and he's making it known. Biden gave one Patriot missile battery, one. He's making sure that 17 of them get to Ukraine. And I think this was, and by the way, I don't think Putin can withstand 100%. We're looking at 50 days, or he could go to 100% sanctions. I don't think the Russian economy can withstand that. So we may see Putin dragged through the street like Gaddafi was.
We'll see. I think it's a genius move by President Trump, like you said. But I'm going to let you go and go do your Hollywood Phil stuff. Remind the listeners again what time CNN tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it. For all of our listeners, on Central Time, it's 9 p.m., Eastern Time, 10 p.m., but it's News Night with Abby Phillip, and I'm part of the panel for the full hour, and I'd love for folks to tune in and give me their thoughts later.
All right. Well, appreciate it, Phil. Good luck. Have fun. And I'll be looking forward to see the sound bites from the crazy liberals on that panel. I'm sure they may.
All right, JP, hold down the fort, man.
All right. Appreciate it. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick time out here before we come back. And Emily Hayes will be joining me at the top of the hour, and we'll be discussing the news of the day and moving on from there. But appreciate you guys tuning in. This is Rightside Radio with JP filling in for Phil. We'll be right back.
I don't think he's a Christian, but think of the girls that you know that have a filthy mouth. You view them differently. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that I try to teach my daughters. That's one thing I learned from the SEAL teams, and trying to flip that switch on and off, is there still is a difference, regardless of how our society wants to blur the lines. There's a difference in how we view it. There's a difference in how people view it. And it's important to understand and uphold that difference.
And stepping back in the house, though, I mean, the decompression piece is good.
Yeah.
That was the place where, like you said, you can be yourself around your wife more than you can anywhere else.
And it's that never was hard for me, though. That was never it was for some guys,
not me
but
either.
Not for
but
me.
it was great. It was wonderful to walk back in and go, ugh.
Oh yeah. That's what it was. It was a relief. I mean, it was almost
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, that's it.
But I do recall one time I'd been back from one of the deployments, not long, and we're late for church. And my daughter, who I think is 10 at the time, is still in the bathroom. And I go up to the door, and she's in the bathroom. And I called her Tootie when she was little. I said, Tootie, pinch it off. We have to go. And my wife leans down the hall and goes, did you just tell your sweet little girl to pinch it off? And I went, I did.
Yeah.
So I had to retool some of my, recalibrate some of my lexicon.
What you say, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. And I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit. Would you? Because I see the things that are in your life. I see the way you talk about your family. I see the way you talk about your faith. Obviously, I can imagine. I mean, my training was a lot different than yours, but I can imagine the dedication and the resilience it took to do the things you did militarily, combat deployments, what you're doing now with your businesses, which I'll get into in a minute. You consider yourself to be a mission-minded person?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, and I think that might just be a thing that men have, maybe more so than, let's say, women. Women, and I've learned a lot about women because I have a wife and 3 girls. I'm around them now, so they're very relational. And we have a HR person that works for us. I've known her for a long time at Covenant Rescue Group. She's kind of our office manager in HR. Unbelievably relational. That's why we hired a female for that role. And men are not. And I would say one step further, yeah, I already have that more of mission mindset or complete the job mindset or whatever you want to call it. I would take it one step further with me. I do cherish relationships I have and friendships I have, but at the same time, the mission supersedes the man sort of thing. That's kind of I definitely lean more to that than I do relationally, which is why I think God gave me 3 girls, is he's teaching me how to probably balance the relationship and the mission a little bit better than I have in the past.
All right. So
that's a long-winded answer.
No, it's a good answer. But let me take it a step further. So mission-minded, I mean, like for instance, me, radio, podcasting, practicing law, those are things that I do, but I feel like I've got a calling that makes those things possible. So in the mission-minded kind of theme of this discussion, how would you take all the things that you do and say, I do them because my calling is?
Well, it's ultimately to present Christ to everybody we come in contact with. That's what I believe. The eternal is far more important than the things that are not eternal. And what is eternal? The only thing that's eternal is who we are in Jesus, right? And so I do believe every aspect of my life, whatever it is, wherever I find myself, I'm going to work as hard as I can so people say, wow, you know what, that guy's, his actions show something different about him, right? But that's not good enough. I have to let them know what the different thing is, and that is Jesus. That's why I generally share the gospel, anywhere we go. Anybody you ask that's worked with us. I had a guy from a church call and say, hey, so how does CRG share the gospel? We're not a Christian-based nonprofit. We're just a normal 501c3. I just happen to be a Christian who's the CEO of a nonprofit, and we have a bunch of Christians that work for us, and we'll share the gospel. Say, hey, guys, look, we're not a Christian-based nonprofit, but this is what we believe. If you need prayer, if you need anything, we do that with law enforcement agencies. So that is the mission. Here's the importance behind it, and Jesus does this perfectly. I do not. You're asking, I use the mission versus relational, mindset, and this is a good segue into it. Jesus succeeded in fulfilling the mission that relationally a lot of people didn't want him to do. That was to go die on a cross. So he succeeded in fulfilling the mission. Obedience to the Father, obedience to the point of death. Job 13:15, though he slay me, I will trust him. But he did it for the relationship with mankind. It was the perfect mix of the mission and the relationship. And that should be who we are. So the mission is, as a Christian, share Christ.
And we are back. This is Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. JP here filling in for Phil while he's up in New York City making the rounds on mainstream media tonight. So make sure to check him on CNN tonight, and then he'll be on Newsmax at 6:20 and 7 o'clock as well. But real quick, folks, going back to the Autopen, like me and Phil were talking about, this is a massive, massive scandal, and I think there's a reason that New York Times is getting leaked this stuff, from whistleblowers. I think, like what Phil said, that is a massive indicator of anything, because I think it's a sign of people, the rats jumping ship. I think they know this is about to get bad. This is a massive scandal because it's an indicator of how the entire presidency was run. How many decisions were made without Joe Biden's approval? Who was running the country? Were these, millennial staffers that were in the White House that were trying to advance their agenda because they had access to the Autopen? We've been saying that for months now, but I think this proves exactly that. They wouldn't be doing it with the pardons if it wasn't, par for the course for them to do with everything. There was that one story that apparently Mike Johnson was talking to President Biden when he was in office about an energy decision he made and how Mike Johnson didn't like it. And Biden was confused. It was like, what are you talking about? I didn't do that. You're misinterpreting, this is no, Mr. President, you signed an executive order that did exactly this. And Joe Biden was perplexed and confused because he didn't know that he did such a thing. Well, that's because I think staffers around him did stuff without him personally knowing it. And that is a massive scandal. We didn't elect a bunch of millennial staffers in the White House to make decisions. I'm not so sure Joe Biden himself could have made better decisions, but at least the country elected Joe Biden to make those decisions. Like I said, these staffers making such important decisions. We saw a wide open border. We saw, wars globally, and the United States continuing to push those, and without any off-ramp in sight. Just the amount of talk about energy, the green news scam. We can go down the list of all of the crazy things. Transgenders going to the White House, shirtless, transgender women in front of the White House with rainbow flags on it. It was a complete circus. And I think we found who the culprits are now. It was the staffers who had access to the Autopen. And, if Fauci in particular, that's kind of one that Rand Paul has fixated on right out of the gate, and rightfully so. Fauci needs to be prosecuted for what happened in 2020. But if if his pardon was signed without Joe Biden's approval at like 10 o'clock at night, I think the New York Times article said, by a staffer, in my opinion, that's a null and void pardon. And then you go down the list of all the other pardons that were given, and it's just a circus. But it, like I said, it's an indicator of the entire presidency. Thank God that's over. However, those people need to be held accountable. We can't just say, it happened, let's just move on. If we have evidence to prove what we've been saying with the Autopen, people need to be held accountable so that something like that can't happen again. We don't have another puppet presidency that Obama's running his third term through because of, Obama staffers that were in the Biden administration again. That's how much influence can somebody like that have if the president is completely a lame duck from beginning to end, and you got staffers who are making all the decisions. How easy is it to influence the staffers? And then the staffers, I'm sure they're not on the same page about everything. One staffer does something, another staffer does something different. It's a complete joke, and it's a complete wreck and a circus. So like I said, I'm glad that it's over. However, it's important to hold people accountable. If we have the evidence on hand, which if the New York Times is releasing it of all places, I'm sure we do, people need to be held accountable. And people like Fauci who got those faulty pardons, they need to be held accountable as well. So let's see. We got some text coming in, 833-687-4448, 833-68-RIGHT. That is the text line number. Coming up at the top of the hour, Emily Hayes from the Dale Jackson Show will be joining me, and we'll be chit-chatting, talking news of the day. We got Brent from Addison here. He's talking about the Epstein list. He said, let's say there is a list. Are they possibly holding off on releasing it until right before the midterms, where would possibly do the most damage to the Democratic Party, given that there were quite a few Democrats on that list? I don't know, man. Like I said earlier, I don't think they have a list. There's flight logs, I'm sure. But also Trump kind of alluded to that the flight logs would, put people in positions they didn't do anything wrong, and to put, I don't know. I think I do trust this administration still to release stuff if they have it. I just don't think the evidence is there like people think. And it's unfortunate that we were, teased to get to this position, but that's kind of where we're at. And the off ramp and this whole thing, how they wrapped up the Epstein stuff, could not have been done worse, in my opinion. I think that is what's going to hurt us in the midterms. Jack from Huntsville said, great job, JP. Thank you. He said he'd love to hear a 2-minute warning sometime on what in the world is up with the Braves this year, man. You tell me. He says, sure, they had a lot of injuries, but the Braves have a terrific organization, management, coaching, and minor league depth for decades. I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff underlying there, but trust me, I'm not enjoying it either. I'm actually going to the Braves-Yankees game this weekend. I'm not looking forward to hopefully they have a good game, but I'm not keeping my hopes up. But I could not agree more, Jack. Hopefully they turn things around soon, but I'm not holding my breath. By the way, like I said, 3 o'clock coming up here. Emily Hayes will be joining me from the Dale Jackson Show. Y'all make sure to stay tuned. This is Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. We'll be right back.
Everybody, because that is the only perfect mix of mission-mindedness and relational mindedness, the relationship mindedness. Now, my wife and my girls, unbelievably relationally minded. We'll let the house burn down around us, but if we can go on vacation as a family, then that's what we're going to do. And it's like, well, okay, we can't do that every other week. We're not billionaires that can go and do all this. But let me tell you what, they'll do that. And every one of my buddies say their wives are the same way, right? When can we go do this with the kids? It's just, and the movie that I like to use an example. Have you ever seen Old School? You know the movie Old School?
Oh, yeah.
So Vince Vaughn is in there. He's like, you sure you want to do this, bro? They're up on stage. He's getting married. She's like, yeah, what are you talking about? Be quiet. And he goes, no, you sure you want to do this? I mean, look at her. There's my wife down there. She's holding the baby. Look, she's just sitting there watching, judging. Look at the baby. As a unmarried guy, I never got that part. I mean, I always thought it was funny the way Vince Vaughn talks, just watching me, judging me, look at the baby. Now that I'm married, 100% get it, because that's it all the time, and because the family relationship is what they are so in tune with.
Oh, yeah. So we're grandparents now, by the way.
So even more so.
And my wife's grandmom name is Sweetie, which is a perfect fit.
What's your grandpa name?
Cap.
Cap?
I'm Cap.
All right.
Cap and Sweetie. But Sweetie told me yesterday, if we don't get down to see the grandbaby sometime soon, I'm going to lose my mind.
It's like, hey.
And I want to see them too. But for her, it is way beyond anything I could ever put my finger on.
But for you, it's your work. It's this mission. And it might be sharing the gospel, and you have to find that perfect mix of it. And that's why I bring that up, is because the mission mindedness that I have, it would go too far one way, and I would work all the time. The relational mindedness that my wife has, it would go too far the other way, and we wouldn't have a dime to spare because we'd be vacationing down at the beach condo every other weekend, right? And so you have to bring those two things together, and the only way they're brought together, and you mentioned it, what is the point of the mission? Sharing the gospel, because that's the only thing that helps these two things correlate or coalesce appropriately.
Awesome. Let me jump into your team time a little bit. I want to hear about it just for a few. Time in the teams. Let me ask you first of all, why Navy? I mean, was that like the lifelong?
No.
I'm going to be a Navy SEAL.
No. I actually want to be an Army Ranger. You know, how about that,
Hey.
right? Yeah. So, or a Marine sniper. Saw that movie with Tom Berenger. Remember that movie, Sniper, with Tom Berenger? I always wanted to be a sniper, Marine sniper, and then after seeing Black Hawk Down, I was like, I want to go be an Army Ranger.
Nice.
My dad took me down to recruiting office, and I was like, Dad, I'd become a firefighter. I was 18 at the time. I turned 19 before I actually went into the Navy. I said, hey, Dad, I think I need to do this. Dad just said, hey, if you're going to do something, not that military service is not special, but do something different. You know, if you're going to go get a degree, get a master's degree. You know, go the whole route. If you're going to go to the military, do something special, do special operations. And Bush had just done the contract. You go Ranger, X-ray for the Green Beret, SEAL contract, PJ. So it was the SOCOM contract.
Call them SF babies.
Yeah, so when you're trying to up that number, so you don't have guys in the regular military going over there just trying to get anybody they can, get the top candidates. So I went and did that, and the hardest test, it was actually SEAL, Air Force for the PJ and the combat controllers. Then it was the Army for the X-ray, and then Ranger contract, or I think now it's called RASP, if I remember right, to actually go to battalion. And then finally was the Marine Corps had an 0311, 0311, their infantry contract, where you could go to screen for MARSOC after, I think, 1 year in the infantry. So somebody's probably listening. They could tell me where I'm wrong.
Were the Raiders standing up by then?
Yeah, they were. They had just, I think it was 2005 that they had started standing the MARSOC Raiders up out of Force Recon. Not Recon. Everybody's like, oh, Marine Recon. Recon is a regular infantry, battalion that do some, different things. But I'm talking about Force Recon, their Special Operations Command. You get a contract for any of those. And SEAL was the hardest. So I just said, all right, Lord, I'll do the SEAL, and if I pass that test, because I had to swim, the run was a little bit harder, had to do more pull-ups.
Were you a big swimmer before you got there?
No, not at all. I could.
Really?
I mean, I could swim. I wasn't going to drown if I fell in the lake, but I wasn't a swimmer. I didn't.
You weren't drown-proof to that point.
I was not drown-proof, and so I said, if I can pass this thing, then that's the route I'll go. And it was physical, and then the written test. You had to score so high on your ASVAB, which is easy, and I did that, and I passed it, and I said, all right, Lord, I guess this is the route you want me to go. I got a contract. And, when I got the contract, I started training for 6 to 8 months, had nobody, didn't know any SEALs, didn't know anybody. I didn't know what to do. So I just kept running. I would run a lot. I knew it was a lot of running. I was running probably 16 miles 2 times a week. And then in the other times I was running shorter distances, 3 and 4 miles every day a week, just training. Pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, doing that. My dad said, hey, you don't have to work. If you're going to go do this, good job, son. Live at my house, eat my food, and train and be ready. And then I'd go up to my buddy's lake house, and I would tread water with a boat anchor. I couldn't tread water with a boat anchor initially, but I got to where I could tread water with his boat anchor. Those little John boat anchors. There's not much weight, probably 15 pounds or something, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, but.
And I would let it down with a rope, and I would tread water. As I'd pull that 20-foot rope up, I'd let it down to the bottom under his pier, and I'd pull it up. I'd hold it over my head and tread, and then I'd let it back down, and that's what I would do. You can see he's over here laughing because I'm sitting here kicking my little feet like I'm doing it, right? And I would do that to train, and then a buddy of mine had a pool, and I would go swim in their pool every day of the week. I just swim laps back and forth.
How long was this self-training going on before you went down?
6 months, so it's, probably, about 6 months.
So what's
maybe a little bit longer.
I don't know the answer to this. What's the pipeline? So you took a SEAL contract, obviously.
Well, it's changed. It's changed a little bit now. So I'll tell you my pipeline, because the pipeline shifts it seems like it shifts every 2 years. I got a contract. I get slated for a time in the Navy, and then I have to pass the test to maintain the contract throughout the duration. So you go to MEPS just like anybody else does, went down to Montgomery, signed on, all that stuff. And 6 months, it might have been a little bit longer than 6 months, but they slate you for a time to leave for boot camp. So you don't leave immediately.
Delayed entry.
Yeah, so it's and it wasn't by choice either. It was just, hey, this is the time that we have for you to leave. And so I'm going through that process, and I have to continue to check into the NOSC or the little Navy area down there. Go and check in. I do my screener, make sure I maintain that contract, and went to the Navy and went through boot camp. When you're done with boot camp, it's like 3 months long or 3.5 months, whatever it is.
Oh, he's up in New York City making the rounds on CNN, Newsmax, and man, he's leaving us behind, I guess. But in the meantime, you got me here today holding down the fort. And also joining me now is Emily Hayes from the Dale Jackson Show. You can hear her every weekday morning from 5 to 9 a.m. on WVNN out of Huntsville with Dale Jackson. Except today, Emily, I'm hearing from you. Apparently, you did the show yourself this morning. So it was the Emily Hayes Show on VNN this morning. Is that how it was?
Yeah. I listen. I am no Dale Jackson. I think that's been made abundantly clear. But today I do feel that maybe I hit the hard news on the nose a little more, covering some of the stuff that was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. And then, of course, the year since has passed with all the Butler stuff up in Pennsylvania, the Secret Service, the assassination attempt on the president. We had some hard news moments, but we also had some silliness as well because Bugsy was there and Yaffe joined at 8. So I feel like the show's not really credible until Yaffe joins at 8 when it's just me. But, Dale worked a whole week and then he needed to take a day off. So we let him do it.
You shouldn't have let him do it. I should have made him come in. Well, that's good. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you mentioned or talked about the Epstein stuff. Yeah, I did a monologue on this. What are your thoughts on how this whole Epstein stuff was handled?
Man, it's a big nothing burger, and I hate it for everybody that was expecting something out of it that was promised a payoff. And they haven't gotten it. And I don't think they're going to get it. And I think the infighting with Dan Bongino raising his voice, getting loud in a closed door meeting with folks doesn't bode well for him. But I'll sum it up like this, JP. For years, folks have been hearing that there's a list, and all these people are on the list. And the list is going to come out, and they've heard it from both administrations. They've been told. And now they're being told, oh, never mind. Nothing to see here. Carry on about your business. We're going to move on from this. We're not going to talk about this anymore. And it's hard to just drop something that's been shoved in your face for the last couple of years. And then poor Dan Bongino, his radio show, his podcast, this is something that he stayed on top of, had multiple sources that he trusted telling him, look, there's stuff here, it's going to come out. Then he gets elevated up into the FBI. And if you remember that last week or two he was on the air, like he made some promises of, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and you're going to know about it. We're going to be transparent. I think Dan's trying to be transparent with everything. He was very honest about the Epstein tape from the jail that got released. And he's like, look, the evidence shows here with this component of the Epstein case that he did commit suicide. This is what the evidence shows here. But I think Dan Bongino and others are very, very frustrated at the way that the AG's office handled everything from the jump with the Epstein case once they got back into the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Because like I said, they have told everyone we've got this. It's coming. And then, oh, never mind. So what's the deal? Now, I do understand and concede that there are there's some things to consider. Like if you got a whole list of names, it could be someone that just had a random coffee meeting with him. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to label that 15-minute meeting 17 years ago as, well, that person's a pedophile because they met with Jeffrey Epstein. So there's context that you have to think of some of these meetings in. And will everyone take the moment to analyze this list should it ever come out as this person is not automatically a pedophile because they had a conversation with Jeffrey Epstein? I don't know that they will. So that's something to take into consideration. But another thing I wish folks would think about, the people that have this information, is you've drummed this up for years. You're not filling in the blanks. So everyone else is going to have their own idea and fill in the blanks. If you leave a void like that, it's just human nature to want to make something make sense. And if you don't tell them the truth or you don't share the information with them so they can fill that gap, they're going to fill it themselves. And that's what you got here.
Yeah, and it's well, first talking about Dan Bongino, I think if there's one person in this whole mess that got put between a rock and a hard place, I think it was him. And actually, I'm seeing on CNN right now that Bongino returns to work on Monday after fallout with Bondino. I think from my standpoint, I think personally, Bondi, whether intentionally or not, overpromised a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. When she was on Fox News constantly talking about the Epstein stuff, about how stuff is on her desk. She's going to review it right now, and she's sifting through, and they got more truckloads of evidence, and yada, yada, yada. I keep dragging people along, kind of getting people on the edge of the seat, waiting for one day we're going to release all the Epstein stuff. And so now that just quietly on a Sunday night, you release to Axios, like, nothing to see here, let's move on along, and then chastise people for asking questions. That reeks of something's up. And
and everyone has a right to ask questions.
Yes.
Everyone does. Because like I said, this has been a constant story in the news for the last couple of years. I think Dale pointed out that if there was something to use against Republicans, don't you think the Biden administration would have done that?
Absolutely.
And I agree. But then I think something else that he brought up was, or is it like an understood mutual destruction? Because if there are enough creeps on the left and enough creeps on the right, and you expose them all, then do you just blow up the two parties and you have nothing left? So was it one of those situations where it's like, we can't release this, even though it could take down some of our political enemies, it would kill our party. So again, having promised all this stuff and not really delivering on promises or not really filling in the gaps, you leave us, the talking heads, to speculate on stuff and to try to fill in those gaps. So good job. No,
well,
not a good job.
I don't think the evidence that people are looking for even exists in the first place still. Like, I don't think there's some notarized document somewhere that says Jeffrey Epstein worked for this intelligence agency and he blackmailed this person and this person and this person. Like, that list doesn't exist. So I think it would have been better to start if Pam Bondi didn't get people's hopes up as much. As, look, I got files on my desk. We'll look through it. If there's something there, we'll release it. If there's not, we'll tell you. But here's the thing. Although I don't think that said document of a client list or something exists, I think they have something. They have something that is not just graphic, evidence that shouldn't be out there, which I agree that stuff shouldn't be out there, but they have stuff. Okay. So
right.
I think the theater should have, don't blow it up and, say like, oh, I have this and this, I'm going to release it to you. I think it should just been as simple as, look, we'll look through what we have. We'll show you what we have other than, the graphic, stuff. And then you can decide from there from yourself. I think the problem is the DOJ's memo was specific to like target you conspiracy theorists. There's no evidence that there's a client list. There's no evidence that, yada, yada, yada. And now you need to move on. Like, don't tell me what to think. Release what you have. Release what you have, and then I'll decide for myself after I read it.
Don't tell me what to think. Don't tell me to move on when for a couple of years you've told me not to go anywhere, to stay on top of people about this. The thing is I don't think anybody wants victims to be re-victimized or to go through their trauma again by having their identities exposed or what traumatic things they suffered at the hands of these people exposed. I don't think anybody's calling for that at all. And if they are, then need a little re-examination there. But if you say you've got people and you've got evidence on people and there's more coming, how many years do we hear there's more coming, keep watching. And the thing is everybody that subscribed to this season of America versus Jeffrey Epstein has been left with a really horrible cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And they're not happy about it. They didn't get the payoff they were promised, and they're going to be vocal about it. And these folks at the AG's office, at the DOJ, at the FBI, they're going to have to deal with the heat that comes with it, and they're going to have to understand people are going to be pissed off about it, and that's just the way it's going to be for a little while they work through it.
Well, and Trump has to protect his attorney general. I understand. I think the attorney general, like, again, put him in a position where this is unfortunate. But I think the getting angry at people who are upset, saying "shut up about Jeffrey Epstein." Nobody actually cares about Jeffrey Epstein, by the way, like Ben Shapiro says, which is crazy to me. I think that response is what's going to hurt more. If it was done in a better fashion of Pam Bondi, well, first, I wish she wouldn't have done what she did in the first place. But if they were more honest, like, listen, we don't have this stuff. It could have been destroyed, whatever. We're sorry. And instead of, getting mad at people who are upset over something that was promised, I think that is what may hurt the GOP in the midterms. Because there's a lot of like libertarians, independent, people who voted for Trump. And I think they're the most upset right now. But they, in large, helped Trump get elected in the first place. So I just worry come 2026, people who voted for Trump in 2024 are done with the Republican Party, and they're not gonna. And who knows, the America Party could become the spoiler a little bit. That's a whole nother thing. But I think what's really going to hurt is how they handled the people who were asking questions, which is unfortunate. I want to see the GOP do well in the midterms, but we'll just have to wait and see.
I think the way they take control of this is, instead of saying things like, this guy's a loser, why are people still talking about him, or whatever, I think they confront it head on and say, hey, I know we said this, we truly believed this, we truly believed we had more information that we could share. Fact of the matter is, we can't. And, our apology, essentially, the way a politician would, but just confront it head on and say, hey, we screwed up. We shouldn't have said anything before we knew for certain what we had, and we did, and we screwed up, and we got you mad, and we're sorry about that. But moving forward, we're going to learn from our mistake, fingers crossed, and not do this kind of nonsense again. Now, will they? No. But, if I was advising anybody, I'd be like, own up to your mistake and move on. Because I think if you say, hey, we got this one wrong, I just know I would have more respect for them if they did, instead of, why are you still talking about this guy? This guy's a loser.
Are you guys really?
No, duh. And he's not the most important thing happening in our country right now either. Like, he's to me, the Epstein stuff is not top priority, beyond the fact that they promised, and it's kind of looking like they lied about some stuff, and that starts to cut into your credibility. Is the Epstein thing the most important thing happening in the country right now? No. Do I wish we would move on from it? Yes. What have I done today? Talked for 2 hours about the Epstein stuff. So I'm a part of the problem too. But that's my advice to them. Are they going to do it? No.
More than likely.
But that's where we are.
We're going to take a quick time out. We're going to come back on the other side here, answer some of y'all's text. 833-687-4448. Let us know your thoughts, and we really appreciate it. This is Rightside Radio, and we're going to take a quick time out. We'll be right back.
Go through boot camp. In boot camp, you have extra, because I had a contract for NSW, you have an extra training in the morning. So
Naval Special Warfare, for those who don't know.
Yeah. So you go NSW guys had to go and train early in the morning, swim and run and all that stuff at boot camp. So we got up earlier. Everybody gets up at 5, let's say, or whatever time it was. We get up at 3:30 or 4, go over, do an hour of training, come back. Everybody's up at 5, making their beds, getting ready for the day for your inspection, normal boot camp. So we had extra stuff at boot camp to keep us ready, albeit it didn't work that well. I got in worse shape in boot camp than I was when I got in boot camp. And once you're done with that, they had something called scruff duty. That's gone now, but scruff duty is where they hold you, and then they take guys, and whoever's the top screeners get sent out to BUDS to class up in BUDS in San Diego. And this is in Chicago, Great Lakes, Illinois, where the Navy boot camp is. So after boot camp, went to scruff duty. I got picked up in the first rotation, and they send us out to San Diego, and there you check in, and you don't check into a class yet, because then they take the top screeners and they put them in the next class to sign, for BUDS indoc. It's not called indoctrination anymore, but at the time I was there, it was called indoctrination. And that's basically a couple weeks of prep for BUDS first phase, and you lose a lot of guys during that time. So that's the process. When I got out to San Diego, I classed up with class 264 and with NDOC, made it through NDOC, made it into first phase, and it's constantly a selection process. So out of the Southeast, they took out of a couple hundred guys that screened, 10 of us actually wound up going to Buds and maintaining that contract. And then when you get into scruff duty, there's a couple hundred guys there. There might have been 300 guys at scruff duty. Well, they took 50 of those guys that were the top screeners and sent them out to San Diego. So I was in that first run, and a lot of my buddies were sent them out to San Diego. And in San Diego, you might have a couple hundred guys waiting to class up, and they'll take however many of those guys to fill that next class. So they're always selecting, taking the top performers because, again, they're trying to get more numbers through. The percentage still stayed the same as failure rate, but they're just trying to get more numbers into the teams. And so I classed up with 264, 366 guys with Bud's NDOC. And by the time we graduated Bud's, I think only 11 originals graduated. Wow. And of the 11 originals that graduated, of 32 guys that I started with actually got tridents. I was one of those guys. I didn't graduate until class 267. So you get rolled for injury, performance, maybe both. I got rolled, and in 267 is when I actually graduated Buds and SQT.
Yeah, we call that recycle in the Army.
Yeah, that's it. You're just getting recycled, but you only get one shot to recycle, and they might hold you 2 or 3 classes for your injury to heal, or whatever it is, but they'll throw you back into a class, and you have certain staples. So Hell Week is one. If you make it through Hell Week, you don't have to go through Hell Week again. If you make it through pool competency in the second phase, you don't have to go through pool comp again. If you make it, and then third phase, you'll have to start over.
Are there ancillary? I mean, in the Army we call them special schools, like additional special schools. And I actually had some Rangers some SEALs in my Ranger class.
Yeah. So
did you go to airborne school? Did you go to?
So we go to jump school because we're all Hey-Ho qualified, all that. So, but we had our own jump school. Because the Army.
You're not at Fort Benning going through jump school, doing
No, the guys used to. But when they set the requirement that all SEALs be Hey-Ho qualified, we stood up our own jump school right there in San Diego at Brownfield, and we did all of our static line there. I've only got like 5 or 6 static line jumps, and then a couple hundred, free fall jumps. There's some guys that really get into it. They have thousands of free fall jumps, especially guys over at development group that jump a lot. Now we spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel and did a lot of that, but and we had a whole air ops thing that we stood up at Team 3 where we would jump in with stuff, and you can do advanced schools later, but a requirement to be a SEAL is to pass jump school, free fall school. And some guys wouldn't pass it. Some guys make it through Buds and then they fail jump school.
That was one of the dreams I never got to go do.
Yeah. Free fall?
By the way, is that still considered a primary insertion technique for the teams? Is that?
No, I wouldn't say it's a primary insertion technique. There's some guys that have inserted into combat situations in Africa primarily via jumps, halo jumps or Hey-Ho jumps. The only ones I ever did was training, and so it wasn't really needed because we're at war in the country we were in, so we didn't have to jump in.
So all right, I see the pipeline. I see you got trained. Let me ask you this real quick before I move on to deployments. So Ranger School for me, I went and.
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. We got some text messages that came in with we're talking about the Epstein stuff. Could have been handled better. What we'd like to see it done differently. First, we got Bobby from Huntsville. Bobby says, we heard the same BS from James Comer about the Biden crime family and bank accounts and everything else for a couple of years, and still nobody's been to court yet. It's that seems to be the theme of people not being held accountable for things, which I kind of ties in line with the Autopen stuff, which I know we'll be talking about later. I hope the Autopen is one I hope people do get held accountable for. Who knows? Epstein stuff would probably be a retort from people on the left. I don't know. It's just it's a mess. But I wish that the Epstein stuff in particular, like we said earlier, just would have been. I wish they wouldn't have overpromised so much on the beginning, on the front end. Maybe we wouldn't have been in this position where it looks like they're covering up something, which I don't think they have in the first place. Which leads to Jeff from Indiana, who says, "JP, I believe that the Epstein files have nothing in them as much as I believe that the Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation." Well, I'm not saying that there's nothing in them. I just don't know if there's the conclusive proof of the things that people want to see, like a client list, like a, some document that, shows everybody, hey, this guy did this to this person and this. I just don't think that evidence exists. I think a lot of the Epstein stuff regards to that were circumstantial. But I don't know. I also agree with Emily, who mentioned that there is a flight log. The flight log is public, by the way. People have seen it. I mean, and this is where people believe that Trump was on, because I think Trump flew with Epstein once or twice. And I think there's a lot of names on there that people connect to certain things where I think you're putting those people in harm's way, that they didn't do anything wrong. They just, flew on Epstein's plane one time or two. It's a mess.
It's the context for everything. You can get a list of names and then, what's the context of their interaction with them,
Yes, exactly. Like, I don't think there's a bunch of footage of a bunch of politicians doing nefarious things. If there was in the first place, I'm sure within the 6 years during Biden's presidency, if there were, the Clintons or whoever on there, I'm sure any incriminating evidence, if it were to exist, would have been long destroyed by now. So I think that's the problem. There's been a lot of time for stuff to be destroyed, and I'm not so sure if there was any evidence of it in the first place, like in a document. I think a lot of it is circumstantial, like I said. But I firmly believe, like what Jeff said, there are documents they can release. It's just, I don't think it's all evidence of graphic stuff that will hurt victims. I think there's stuff in there. For some reason, they're not wanting to release it and they want to move on. And by the way, I don't think this is the top priority story. I think it is a story that unfortunately is a top priority with a lot of voters. And I think that's why it's an important story. My opinion on what Epstein was and what he was doing isn't changing based on what the government could release or the fact that they're not releasing. Like, that's not going to dictate, my opinion on Epstein and what he was and what he did. But I think the way they're handling it is going to hurt in the midterms, because like I said earlier, a lot of the independent voters, this is something that's important to them. So although if it's not important to Republican voters, it is a story nonetheless, because I think it is important to a lot of voters who could swing the midterms over something like this. Whether you think it's silly or not, I think that's just the truth of it. It's unfortunate. I want the GOP to do well, but they're gonna have to come clean a little bit.
They're going to have to own up to it and say, look, we mishandled this. We misrepresented it based off the limited information we had at the time. And it's, this one's on us, our bad. If they want to keep any kind of
credibility,
trust building. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, maybe we're part of the problem, like you said, lads. Maybe the right. Ones is their time.
We keep talking about it.
Well, I do think there's other interesting stories out there, like the Autopen stuff, which we can talk about next segment. I think there's a lot there that shows a lot that went on in the past administration that we guessed and were believed, but I think some stuff's going to start to come to light, and I think it's going to be a big bombshell and big scandal, rightfully so. But we're going to get into that on the other side. This is JP and Emily filling in for Phil today on Rightside Radio. We're going to take a quick time out and be right back.
All about patrolling and small unit tactics and, and mountaineering and whatever else, and swamp operations, and which was miserable. And all those things were, they were real.
Where'd y'all do your swamp stuff at? Mississippi?
No, down in Florida.
Oh, in Florida? Okay.
Yeah, Eglin Air Force Base. But that being said, later I realized, I think more than anything, I learned things about me. Yeah. And I gained stuff that was not necessarily what I would call military. Yeah. It was more along the lines of things that it did to me, for me, and taught me about me. Yeah. What about you with Buds and the rest?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the most concise way I can say it is, again, a scriptural principle. David says, you knit me in my mother's womb. God made you who you were before you were even born. He knew you. He knit you. He put you on this world for a certain purpose. And the New Testament tells us so that he's placed every man in his time and his specific dwelling so that he might reach out and find God. So he placed us here to find him, to be able to see this is who God is, right? The Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So I do believe that aspect of it. But he made you a certain way, right? He made you to find him, but he also made you a certain way to share him with the world around. I don't believe, what I've learned is I don't believe everybody's like, oh, yeah, they trained you that way in BUD/S, or they trained you that way to be a SEAL. No, that's not what they're doing. Notice everything I've talked about is a selection process. It's a constant selection process. And even once you get there, once you get to a SEAL team, once you get to in an instructor role, once you get to development group for the guys that go special mission unit, it's still a selection process for those individuals. Even once they make it there, you have to continually perform. And I would say that for me, that's what it taught me. They don't train you to do anything. I mean, they train you in some ways. They hone you, make you better. But the end goal, especially for BUD/S, is to find, is this the individual that we want to become a SEAL?
Yeah.
For sniper school, is this the individual that we want to become a sniper? I'm already a sniper, right? They just find me. I'm already a SEAL. They just find me. I'm already a Tier 1, a Special Mission Unit SEAL, development group SEAL. They just find me. Does that make sense? And that's all of their processes that they're doing in every aspect. Then you get out of the SEAL teams. I'm already an operator, but the CIA finds me for the specific thing they want, or the DIA finds me for the specific thing that they want. They don't really teach you to become anything.
Who was it? Was it maybe Michelangelo who said that the art that he is sculpting is already in the stone? And I'm super paraphrasing.
He just reveals it.
He just reveals it.
That's exactly
his job is to bring it out.
I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned is that individual, wherever you're at, wherever you're at within your community or whatever, that individual is already there. For me in the SEAL teams, I was already a SEAL. They just found me. And there's not many guys. That's why we have such a high attrition rate, right? And then you go to the next step, like sniper school. That's why we have such a high attrition rate at sniper school. These guys are SEALs, but they're not a sniper. That's why you have such a high attrition rate in development group for the guys that go over SEAL Team 6. These guys are already SEALs. They're top-level operators. But we need something different for this. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's kind of the flow. And that's probably what it taught me, is that everything is finding out, are you the person that can be this? Not training you to be the person to be that, which I find interesting because, again, it's a scriptural principle.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think we find problems in this world. We either desire to be things that we weren't made to be. We shouldn't do that, right? It's the guy with the 1 talent, the 5 talents, and the 10 talents.
Well, boys outside his gifts.
Yeah, that's right. If you're outside your gifts, you don't desire to be something that you weren't made to be.
Yeah.
And be the best thing that you can be. It doesn't matter if it's a dang garbage truck driver. My granddaddy, he's a farmer. He loves farming. He loves digging in the dirt. And I was at his house this morning, and that's what.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back. This is producer JP here, filling in for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. I wanted to remind folks, Phil is currently up in New York City. He will be
New York City.
I know. I had to do a wellness check on him earlier to make sure he's, still alive.
Hey, are you old enough to know that joke, the New York City joke?
No.
JP, you child.
Well, what's it from?
It's the Pace Pecani sauce commercial about the guy who got his salsa from New York City. It's like they're all a bunch of cowboys around a campfire, and it's just
Nope, never heard of it. I apologize.
Makes me feel super old.
I'm sorry to make you feel old. I feel like that's a daily occurrence in here. Phil asking me if I know things, and then I'm just like, yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's got to go hit the old Google machine.
Phil will be on Newsmax tonight, 6:20, 7 o'clock Central Time. I know he has people asking what times Eastern or Central. That is Central time. And he will be on CNN at 9 o'clock Central time on the show with Abby Phillip. If it's the infamous show with Scott Jennings on there, I believe Phil will be playing the Scott Jennings role on that show today, where he's going to be almost outnumbered by a bunch of liberals on CNN. So make sure to stay tuned and check that out. He will not be back tomorrow. Unfortunately, he's going to have to fly back, but Jeff Poor will have the reins tomorrow. But in the meantime, you got JP and Emily filling in for you today. Thomas Mathens was actually asking that question. He said be on that. Yep, that is 9 Central on CNN, 6:20, and the 7 o'clock appearances will be on Newsmax. So that's what that'll be on. He says also the Epstein saga, 1,000 pedophilia tragedies, maybe not a list, but maybe a database. Says it really smells like a cover up designed to protect some allies or friends of some high level folks, or to get quid pro quo from those people. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are saying. It's just unfortunate because I think that's what it gives off. Where I don't know if they had it to begin with. I think Bondi may have hurt Trump and put him in that position to make him look like this. But who knows? We'll see how fast the story goes away. I'd much rather like to talk about other things, like this Biden Autopen story, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. Me and Phil talked about it a little bit earlier, but the New York Times put up an article, and I think Phil alluded to this. The New York Times, being the publisher of this, is telling with such a liberal, publication that it is. So I'm going to read from part of the article here. It says, Mr. Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people. He and aides confirmed. Rather, after extensive discussion of different possible criteria, he signed off on the standards he wanted to be used to determine which convicts would qualify for reduction in sentence. Even after Mr. Biden made that decision, one former aide said the Bureau of Prisons kept providing additional information about specific inmates, resulting in small changes to the list. Rather than ask Mr. Biden to keep signing revised versions, his staff waited and then ran the final version through Autopen, which they saw as a routine procedure, the aide said. They saw it as a routine procedure. What does that tell you? That they've been given the reins to the Autopen the entire presidency. That's exactly what that says. If they're saying, oh, well, we're not going to run it by Mr. Biden. We got the Autopen. We don't want to bother the president of the United States with this. So, we'll just use the Autopen and it'll be all just fine. That's routine procedure. That's how the country was ran for 4 years. And yes, this is a big scandal because that means that our country was run by a bunch of staffers instead of the president of the United States. And now you can have whatever thoughts you want on the 2020 election if you think that was a fair, but the bottom line is Biden was inaugurated. He was the sitting president of the United States. He should have the authority to make his own decisions and not have staffers do stuff for you. And one can ask if Biden was even able to do something, to make his own decisions, which, you can think about that whatever you want. But Biden he wasn't even given the chance by his staffers to make that decision. They just went straight to the Autopen. And what I think is funny about this is that Biden gave them a list supposedly of, criteria to pardon people with, certain criminals that have this and this and this, I want them pardoned. If they just went straight with that list and then Autopen the rest, I still think that's wrong and a controversy. I think Biden should individually sign on each, person being pardoned. But even if they did that route, like even if they said, look, he signed off on this criteria, we're going to go with this criteria and then Autopen the rest. They didn't even do that. They changed the criteria. They changed the criteria that he originally signed to and then used the Autopen from there. So that's an even bigger scandal to this, all these pardons being null and void, because Biden not only didn't individually approve of them, but the original criteria he signed off on personally was changed and he didn't approve the next criteria. So that right there is an indicator on just how much of a circus it was in the White House.
Well, he left that criteria up to interpretation of his aides and his assistants. And it should not be that way when you're talking about pardons for criminals and things like that. Like, this is not, we need the president's signature on proclaiming National Ice Cream Day is every third Sunday in July. You know what I mean? Like, run the Autopen for that. Who's going to be mad about that? Not I. But when you're talking about folks that you're going to cause a ruckus if you pardon them, then you need to be ready to stand up behind it. And it shouldn't just be a list of, well, if they meet this criteria, then that's cool.
Yeah. I think in a perfect world, it would have been individually Biden approving. What was it, 1,100 pardons he issued in a day? Like, that was clear to me that an Autopen was being used because, I mean, anybody, especially Biden of his mental acuity, is not sitting down and signing that many pardons in one day. Like it's just not happening. And in the dead of night, like 10 o'clock at night, Fauci's pardon gets signed by a staffer. And then you got like a midnight or something, I believe. I think it was like the midnight before Trump got inaugurated is when Biden family members were preemptively pardoned. So not even pardoned on stuff that they've already done, but preemptively pardoned on things that they could do in the future. That is so egregious. And I mean, since I know Biden goes to bed at like 4 p.m., I know for sure he did not sign a pardon at like midnight on something for his own family. It's just a mess. And Trump even said it during today in the Oval Office. The Autopen should be used in certain scenarios. He gave the specific scenario of like a 7-year-old kid writing to the president of the United States, and the president, reads the letter, tells him to use the Autopen to sign, the response. Like it should be used in specific minimal instances like that. Or if the president is overseas, something comes up, he needs to sign something quickly, he gives audible, approval that, you can use the Autopen to sign for this. I approve it. There you go. It shouldn't be mass pardons on criteria that the president hasn't even approved of yet. That is a complete scandal. But like I say again, I think the last sentence of that little excerpt I read where it said this was just normal procedure for them. That is what's telling of
that's very telling.
Everything like that. And I mentioned it earlier about the Mike Johnson story where he brought up something to Biden and he was completely aloof on him doing like signing an executive order. What staffer signed that executive order? What staffer signed this? The staffers, I'm sure, aren't on the same page on everything. So a staffer could have done this and a staffer could have done that. And then we have a White House that's run by like 10 or so people instead of the president of the United States. And it's just, but also who can have influence through the staffers? Can somebody like an Obama who, there was a lot of shared staffers between Biden and Obama. That's a great opportunity for Obama to have a third term, which it's like you just go down the rabbit hole of what a complete mess that is. And the only way to prevent it from happening again is if people are held accountable for it. And then there's the flip side of it of what pardons are no longer, good because they've now discovered all of the pardons that were signed by Autopen by a staffer, which Fauci in particular, I can't remember the staffer's name off the top of my head, but it was written in the New York Times article that Fauci's pardon in particular was written at 10 o'clock at night from a staffer, a White House aide. And now we got Rand Paul, rightfully so. He's now moving forward with, prosecuting Fauci because his pardon has officially been proven, not valid. Was it Mr. Zientz? Mr. Zientz is the staffer who signed with the Autopen for the Fauci pardon. Could we see a day of reckoning soon? I mean, I don't know how soon. Phil mentioned this on the show earlier. Like, it's probably not going to be as soon as social media wants. There's a process you got to go through. But I think once that process has gone through, do we see a perp walk with people like Fauci? Do we see a perp walk, with people like Hunter Biden or other folks like that? Will there be a day of reckoning, or will this be sort of an instance of, we got better things to deal with. Let's, move on.
Right.
I'm curious.
Has there ever been a recalled pardon? Like, and forgive my ignorance on this, but I mean, is that something that can be done? Can a pardon be recalled, revoked?
I think if the pardon was never claimed to be, valid in the first place, I think that's fair to do. Presidential pardons generally cannot be revoked once they're finalized and delivered. But I think the whole question here is, okay, was it ever finalized and valid in the first place? How many pardons did Biden actually approve personally? Because if he didn't personally approve all of them, we could see an instance of all of those pardons not even being valid in the first place, which
so
is a mess.
It's irrevocable once delivered. There's no constitutional or legal provision that allows for the revocation of a presidential pardon once it's been delivered to the recipient. The only potential exception is if a pardon has not yet been formally delivered. The precedent is an 1869 federal court ruling established that when a pardon is complete, there is no power to revoke it. But so something that I don't believe they've ever had to deal with before is the Autopen situation, when you have staffers who are just going off of, well, I feel like the president with the bullet points he gave on what would meet his pardoning standard would pardon this person. So I'll just go ahead and hit the Autopen on it.
Mhm.
This is I love the term. It's unprecedented.
Mhm.
So here we go.
It is unprecedented, but that's also why it's important to treat it so harshly, because God forbid we get in another situation where we have a president that's so incompetent physically like Biden was, and the staffers feel that it's okay to just, use the Autopen or whatever other means to just, get around the president. Don't want to bother the president. Yeah. Okay. I don't think unless we treat this harshly as it deserves, I fear we're setting a precedent of like, this is okay. This is not okay. And I hope that, the DOJ, like I said earlier, Rand Paul has issued a criminal referral back to the DOJ. Obviously there's got to be a process proving the pardons were not valid to begin with, but this can't just be something that we let slide, because if we let it slide, then God forbid, like I said, we get another situation like this, we've set a precedent of this is okay. And I don't think it is okay. And we need to have some sort of measures put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. Granted, it'd be nice if we don't elect somebody as mentally incompetent like Biden again. But if that were to happen, there needs to be a precedent set of, the president needs to be the one making decisions, not anybody who just has access to an Autopen. And I think today is proving, that unfortunately was the case during the Biden administration. Well, we got to take a quick time out, folks, and we're going to come back on the other side, answer some of y'all's text, 833-687-4448. Text us in, let us know your thoughts on this Autopen scandal. Do you think it's going to be dealt with, or do you think it's just going to go by the wayside? Well, we'll just wait and see. But this is Rightside Radio with JP and Emily filling in for Phil. We will be right back.
Showing me his plants that he built a little greenhouse for. It's a piece of plastic draped over some cross ties or some sawhorses with cross ties on top of it, because plants were $4.99 now, and he wasn't about to do that. He can put one seed in a little bowl and have 80 plants for less than $12, right? So he's in his 80s, but that's the way God made him. Are you being what God made you to be, or are you trying to be something else? And that's what the SEAL teams finds out. It finds out the posers. It finds out the frauds.
It does. All right, so multiple deployments.
Yeah.
Some, I assume, non-combat, some combat.
Yeah, so I mean, all of our deployments would have been considered a combat deployment, but not every deployment, like what I mentioned to you, the checking into Team 3, not every deployment meant, even though it was a combat deployment for the team, meant that I was necessarily involved directly in combat.
Right. So how many and where?
So as far as the Navy is concerned, 3 sea service deployments, but my last deployment, because it was a year long, and even the one to Afghanistan was a year long, but I rotated in later than some of the other guys. We rotated in and out of 9 countries, and I'll name them all here in a second. We'll see if I get my number right. But you got the Iraqi, Iraq, but what's it called?
OIF, Iraqi Freedom.
Yeah, Operation Iraqi Freedom, OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom.
Right.
They call it all something different now, right? Everything's changed. Went to Jordan twice, went to Bahrain twice, went to Korea twice, went to Yemen once, ported in Oman. So, I got stamps for Oman, I guess. You could say I went to Oman. So maybe that's seven countries. Any of the others I've been to have been on contracts outside of the SEAL team. So I guess 7 countries during the time in the SEAL teams, rotating in and out. And then one of them was a cool mission. At the time, I was really upset about it because I wanted to be in Afghanistan with the boys killing bad guys. It was actually a cool mission with SDV. Without talking too much about it, we were just protecting the SDV, running sniper ops, protecting the SDV as it did the thing it did. And it was, we were around the Horn of Africa. We were in Iranian waters. We were in Omani waters, and all of that area of the. or the Straits of Hormuz when all that stuff was going on out
Yeah.
there. Yeah, so that would have been one of those deployments, not necessarily a country. Went out of Bahrain. Oh, and UAE. So I guess that'd be 8. UAE, United Arab Emirates.
SDV, was that the SEAL delivery vehicle?
It is, yeah. So they do a lot of stuff. It's a little bit different. Again, it's considered combat because it's more. I don't want to say necessarily too much. It's reconnaissance in nature. I'll leave it at that. But it's combat reconnaissance.
All right. Some of those were shooting tours.
Oh yeah.
And you went down as a sniper on at least 1 or 2 or 3 of your
all of them. Yeah. So when with the exception of that first one where I checked into the team, went to Iraq, so I was nothing. I was just a new guy at the team, escorting some weapons around and doing the thing in Germany. But all the others, all the other deployments, I was a sniper. And then the one where I went to all those different countries, I was a lead sniper at SEAL Team 3 in particular for our task unit.
Confirmed kills?
Oh yeah. Killed a lot of people as a sniper. Got the privilege to kill a lot of people as a sniper. I got an award that says, I said this on the Mic Drop podcast not too long ago, I probably have 8 legitimate sniper kills that I shot the dude and we got pictures and all that stuff. I've got those 8. I got an award for 21 kills, which is what I got a buddy that calls me 21-0, but that wasn't necessarily, it appears that way in the way they count it, but I might have shot the guy and 5 other dudes, me and a buddy of mine, Mike, he's going to do some stuff for the agency we were training the other day, and we were talking about it, how many dudes did we shoot that everybody else shot too? So you might have 5 guys shoot one dude and everybody's claiming a kill. Well, it's the same guy, so they're like, oh yeah, task unit's got 5 kills, and no, we got 1 kill, but it's 5 dudes shooting the same guy. So,
but he's full of holes.
Oh no, yeah, he's definitely dead. But that being said, so did get quite a few confirmed sniper kills, especially as a new guy sniper, and then did some other really cool missions where we didn't necessarily get kills, but they were probably sketchier than anything I ever did, even getting shot at in combat, because it's hey, if we get shot doing this, we're done.
What's the longest in an austere environment or a combat zone environment where you had to lay in a hide and just provide
time?
overwatch? Yeah, longest on scene.
On scene, probably 72 hours, I think. Somewhere around 3 days. Yeah,
Okay.
and I mean, it's not like you're just laying here like in the movies, just not moving at all,
Pissing on yourself and the whole thing.
And we are back, folks. This is JP and Emily Hayes filling in here for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. I got to make an announcement, folks, by the way. We've been doing these long-form podcasts with Phil called the Just Right podcast. We've been trying to get those out pretty regularly. Well, we'll be having the 5th edition, I believe. Yep, 5th edition of the Just Right podcast coming out tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. And Phil is interviewing Brian Dawson with 1819 News. If y'all don't know, Brian Dawson has an amazing story. He was facing, I believe, 384 years in prison before, God making a miracle pretty much, and him coming out and meeting his lovely wife, becoming a Christian, starting 1819 News. And it's just amazing story of faith, perseverance. And, if you need some inspiration, listen to this interview with Brian Dawson tomorrow night. That's tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. You can go to our YouTube channel. You'll see it's set up as a premiere on there. 6 o'clock tomorrow night. It will go live. Phil interviewing Brian Dawson with 1819 News. Do not miss it. We have a couple of texts coming in, by the way, 833-687-4448. Let us know your thoughts on this Autopen controversy. It's just nuts, in my opinion. Brian from Harvard said, how is the pardon considered complete is my question. I think that is the question. And then the next text, Thomas from Athens, kind of saying the same thing of, quote, when the pardon is complete, but some or many may not really be legitimate pardons. I think that is the question of, the pardons may have been served and completed, whatever. But if the pardon was not valid to begin with, I think that's where the question comes in of, okay, well, can the pardon, even if they have been completed, be valid if they weren't even personally signed by Joe Biden? And Joe Biden, the criteria he signed off on wasn't even used in the final stages, and it was just used with an auto pen. I think that is where I agree with Thomas and Brian there. Of the question is not if the pardon was complete; it's if the pardon was valid in the first place. Jeff from Indiana also texted in and said, actually, Hunter Biden's pardon was signed by Joe. I think that was the only one that was. I think you're correct, actually, on that. I think Joe Biden did personally sign that one. And then he sent another text that said, well, the thing about the auto pen pardon should be seen in the same way as forgery and is null and void. Yep. I agree 100%. If it was not the actual authentic presidential signature, which is required on pardons, then I think that's where you have a problem. Dana from Athens said the DOJ should look into forgery. Yep. The Autopen signature on the pardons isn't Joe's, it's Jill's. The B gives it away. It says, look at the B in the Biden. That's how the Mrs. signs her name. Could be. It could be Joe Biden or the Autopen. Either way, it wasn't Joe. So if it's not Joe signing individual pardons, I do not think they're valid. Actually, I feel like they're definitely not valid at all.
Do you think that maybe after this gets examined moving forward, there could be talk of it's got to be in the president's hand? Like it cannot be an auto pen signature. It has to be signed by the president, even if it's at 11,000 pardons. They'll take away the opportunity to use auto pen.
I don't see. I would prefer the president like have it in his hand and personally sign them. However, I do think in a situation, God forbid, if we're in a situation where something crazy happens, overseas or somewhere, and the president can't be in the Oval Office to personally sign it, and it's in the last couple of days of his presidency, he needs to sign these pardons. I'm fine with him using the auto pen in a crazy circumstance like that, as long as there's proof that the president gave verbal approval on the independent pardons, and not get on the phone and say, yeah, whatever pardons you have, just sign them. I think it has to be individual approval on each one. So I really don't have a problem with them using the auto pen in circumstances like that. However, I do have the problem with them using the auto pen maliciously without getting individual approval on each one from the president. I think that's the scandal. And I get the auto pen there's certain stuff the president can sign. There's a document that I have from when my grandfather passed away of like the president giving recognition to a fallen veteran. And that's signed with an auto pen, I'm sure. Like stuff like that.
Right.
In being used.
My husband's at his parents' home in Millbrook, they've got something on the wall honoring, I believe, his grandfather or great grandfather, and it's got the president's signature on there. And I don't think that.
Yeah. And I'm fine.
That was when they sat down for it, and I understand that. And like you said, like you get it, I get it, we all get it. But dude, at least be in the room. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If both of your wrists are broken, use the auto pen. You know what I mean? Be in the room though, and like verbally sign off on someone getting the pardon.
Yeah,
or using the auto pen.
I think the auto pen is necessary for stuff like that, but not pardons, not mass 1,100 pardons.
No.
That's where it's just that's a massive scandal in my opinion. And then one last text before we go to break here. Dave from Capshaw says Biden's auto pen was not just unprecedented; it was unprecedented. See what he did there.
I like it. Like it.
It's funny, but it's also sad because it's true. It's unfortunate. We're going to take a quick time out. We're going to come back. Last hour go home time with JP and Emily Hayes filling in here for Phil while he's up in New York City making the rounds. CNN Newsmax. Y'all make sure to catch him tonight on there. And in terms of us, y'all stay tuned for the break. We'll be right back.
Not that. Don't piss on yourself. Don't crap your pants. Don't piss. Nobody does that. Just roll over and pee and make. And but I would say I think 72 hours was the longest one. That I was in a sniper hide on, and we would move, and we were breaking down that sniper hide and moving around.
2-man team.
No, it was so for us on that one. I think it was 4 of us. I think it was 4 of us in a sniper hide, 2 snipers, a comms guy, and a guy that was carrying rockets and the Carl G. I don't know if you know the Carl G. Man, that thing is phenomenal. Yeah, Carl G. So the guy that was carrying it, Greg, he killed like 12 people with the Carl G. It was in one. He just said, he's like, hey man, I'm going to set this thing to airburst. These guys are shooting at us behind a wall. They hang out the wall and shoot. And he's like, I'm going to set an airburst right over that wall. So I gave him the distance to the wall. It was like 1,100 meters. He's like, I only got 11 and 12. And I just remember him turning it and clicking. He's like, I'm going to leave it right here halfway between. He fired that thing over the wall, and it air bursted. and the shooting stops. So we clear up to it, and dude, all these dudes are back there. They're like, oh, it's kind of half alive, half dead. We do the biometrics on them, take the pictures, and all that stuff. But it had those. I was talking to Andy Stumpf about this on a podcast not long ago. Flechettes. You remember the flesh?
Oh yeah.
I'd never seen what was in a Carl G airburst. Well, it was all those flechette things, man. It looked like it just tore these dudes to pieces. Anyway, so sorry.
Just so you know, we're at 1 hour here. So.
Can we take a piss?
Yeah, I think we can. Right. Why don't we do this? Well, I don't have to say it now because you just said it, so we're on the mic. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come right back and wrap up. Let me ask you, though. First of all, how many years were you in active duty?
So I want to clarify something on that question. I was in the SEAL teams for 6.5 years, or maybe just a little bit less than 6.5 years. But I was in the military for a total of 8 years. Now, you're going to understand this because I've had some people ask, as I've said before, 6 and 8. And here's the reason. When I was running the campaign for sheriff, people asked, well, I was in for 6 years because I was at the teams for 6 years, a little over 6 years. And that's what my DD-214 would say. However, there was a year and a half technically on my paperwork. So if anybody does a search, they say this guy was in 8 years. So I had people during my campaign for sheriff that said, what's this guy trying to hide? Was he kicked out of the military? He was in for 8 years. Why is he saying 6.5? Does that make sense?
Okay.
On the other, and you understand that being in politics, anybody will grab it wherever they can.
They're going to scrutinize, man.
And so then I was like, well, crap, So then I'm like, all right, well, I'm in 8 years, but I feel bad saying that because my last year and a half was I was still a SEAL. I was checking into a NOSC as an inactive ready reserve to get called back in anytime, and I was trying to go to the reserve SEAL team, but that's where they found I had type 1 diabetes, and I wasn't able to continue my service. So I was in that kind of a med process. So I didn't actually get my final paperwork till I think it was August of 2014, which was exactly 8 years from the time that I signed on and went into the Navy to the time I exited the Navy. 8 years.
I get it. But let me ask you about that. So type 1 diabetes, I mean, is there diabetes in your family? Was this something was this injury induced? Was it hereditary? Where'd this come from?
So I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes it was at that transition time between active duty SEAL teams into reserve SEAL teams. And my mom had diabetes, and at the time, I remember going to the Group 1 medical doctor and him saying, and me and my wife and even friends in San Diego, they weren't in the military or anything. They're just friends we had in San Diego we went to church with. They live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho now. Is it Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? Yeah, they live in Idaho now, in Coeur d'Alene, and he's a prosecutor. But they were laughing because I get back from all these deployments, and I'm like, hey, I might get out. I'd screened positive, for development group to go to Green Team, did the run, the swim, all that stuff. And the reason I say that is they actually used that against me because they're like, there's no way you have diabetes. That's what the Group 1 doctor said. He says, there's no way you have diabetes. And I was like, I don't think I have diabetes. He said, we'll retake the test. Come back again. I'll come back the next day. He said, be sure you fast for 12 hours. Fast for 12 hours, come back again. He's like, triglycerides were out of whack that they had run, and he
said,
"Could
you feel it? I mean,
no, not at the time.
No.
Now looking back on it, yes, there were things that I was feeling that I thought was just normal, everyday pain and everyday issues that it was actually related to diabetes, but I didn't know it at the time. It's just different things I can talk about in a little bit, but no, there was nothing that made me think that I had diabetes. And he's like, there's no way you've got diabetes. The second time, he said, it was a Friday. He said, do me a favor. When you go home this weekend, don't eat a bunch of chips at the Mexican restaurant. Don't drink, which I didn't drink anyway. But he said, don't drink. Don't go out to the bars. He said, you ain't got to fast. But he said, just do kind of like a chicken and broccoli sort of thing. He said, and I remember eating, I remember my wife fixing chicken. I was like, hey, we need to do this so I can make sure my stuff is right. He's saying it's wrong because maybe what I ate beforehand. So literally the whole weekend eating chicken and broccoli, and salad.
Wow.
Monday coming in, my blood work was okay. It was good. And but I remember that as I was getting out. So I transitioned over into the reserve side, come back home to Birmingham, Alabama, and I wound up losing about 25 pounds I think it was 26 exactly, but my wife showed me a video of it the other day. She still had saved on her phone. Like I looked like a different person. I went from 200 pounds down to 174 pounds in less than 2 weeks, about 10 days.
What was that attributed to? I mean,
Well, that happens when you have diabetes.
Okay, so
type
that
1
was
diabetes, yeah.
All right.
And peeing all the time. My wife kept me, and she feels bad. She talks about, at times she felt really bad when she found out. She's like, did you brush your teeth? You smell like cream corn. That's what she was saying. And it was that sweet smell. It was that because I was in, diabetic ketoacidosis. It's that blood sugar coming out. Like law enforcement, you pull somebody over, if they're a diabetic, you might think that they were drinking because of the smell and also because of how they act. So a buddy of mine's medic said, bro, you sound like he said, everything you're telling me, I was hunting with these guys. I was passing out at the base of a tree. I'd found me sleeping out there. He's like, dude, all your stuff you have going on sounds like you have diabetes. And so now I'd heard that before from the.
No kidding. I mean, that
was here. That was right up the road here hunting I say down the road, I should say, over in Walker County. And so I went home and I said, Mom, Tyler says he thinks I have diabetes. Can I use your blood? She had diabetes. I said, can I use type 1? I said, let me use your blood sugar checker and check my blood sugar. My blood sugar was like 590.
Oh, wow.
So we knew then.
You're still walking around and all that.
Oh,
though.
yeah. And I was passing out at weird times. I was peeing all the time. It was so all of the things, everything was.
But you got Emily Hayes and myself in the meantime here holding down the fort. And Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. We were talking off air about the Dan Bongino story of him apparently flipping his lid and yelling at Susie Wiles and Pam Bondi. The whole reason this got brought up is apparently I'm seeing Benny Johnson on X saying that he can confirm that Dan Bongino is back in the office today, which is a good sign. And he claims to be in good spirits and that they're working on something big, and alluded to the fact that there may be some incoming releases of some Epstein documents that they can release, which is a good sign. But then me and Emily were talking, and I mentioned that when I saw the story about Dan Bongino flipping his lid at Pam Bondi, I was like, that's completely believable, 100%. And I know why, because although I wasn't working for Dale at the time, but I've heard the recording myself of one day Dan Bongino getting pissed at Dale and calling him up on his radio show and just yelling at him and getting in a big it's on recording. And by the way, if you haven't heard that, that's one of the funniest. I'm sure Dale doesn't mind rehashing his beef. But I thought it was quite funny. But I heard I think you mentioned that you and Bugsy were talking about if that was believable. It's like 100%. 100% that's believable.
We were talking about it off the air, and it kind of carried over onto the air, and we brought Yaffe in on it too. But it was like, I mean, in your mind, do you even speculate for a second that Dan Bongino didn't get heated in this meeting and at least raise his voice, or as I say, get loud, that he got loud with them?
Absolutely not.
And we're all like, 100% that happened. We can believe that happened. That's like saying, this is what we said, JP, and you'll know this for certain. We said that's like saying that we wouldn't expect that kind of behavior from Dale, for Dale not to get loud about something in a meeting. And Yaffe said, because Yaffe's so dang nice.
Yeah.
And Yaffe's like, Dale doesn't really get fired up in meetings and stuff like that. And Bugsy and I almost at the same time said WVNN meetings, not staff meetings with the whole company.
Yeah.
And then Yaffe was like, oh, yeah. I can see that. I can see that. Because I'll tell you, Dale is the one that gives his report and then is on his phone the rest of the staff meeting. 100%. But when it's a WVNN staff meeting, he's very engaged.
Yeah, I can confirm. Yeah, I can confirm. But I found that funny that if there's any doubt that Dan Bongino was getting heated, 100%. It's like there's not even a question.
I don't think Dan Bongino is standing up saying, "All right, guys, let's calm down here, let's kumbaya this moment." By any means. I'm sure Dan Bongino was like, 4 years I have followed this and you guys told me something was happening.
Yeah.
I can see that happening.
And my personal, thought on that is I think that's a good sign. I mean, obviously if it's controlled and it doesn't get out of control and just, reckless, but I think him showing passion, even if it's with his coworkers, I think that's a good sign. I think that's somebody who genuinely cares, who has integrity and wants to do the right thing. And if he feels like the right thing's not being done and he's going to get pissed about it, I think that's a good sign. Now, the question is, and I saw some anonymous source to whoever, CNN or something, said that.
Gotta love those.
Said that, well, Dan was completely fine with the rollout until he started getting criticism online, and then he completely flipped. And so then you have to have the question of, did Dan see all his supporters over the years start claiming that he's covering up for Epstein, and then that's when something changed?
No, I'll tell you, my gut feeling there is that it was a slow burn for Dan Bongino, and that he was trying to. I cannot speak for Dan Bongino, obviously. My take on it is that he went into this Epstein situation with some positivity. All right, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Time goes on. We're going to get to the bottom of this, right? Hey, guys, we're still working towards getting to the bottom of this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, don't forget, we're working on getting to the bottom of this, right, you guys? And then he got pissed. Like, he slow burned into getting fired up, is what I think.
Well, and I don't know. I'm not so sure. Yeah, at the time, it was a big story, and I mean, Daily Wire was reporting it, so I believed it. But on hindsight, do you think Dan actually called President Trump and said, "It's either me or Bundy. You fire Bundy, or I'm out"? I don't know.
I can't imagine anybody calling the president and being like, "It's them or me. It's them or me." Like, how's it? I mean, I don't think Trump. I just don't think he cares that much.
Yeah,
You're gonna threaten me? Okay, buddy, I'll take care of you. I highly doubt that conversation happened. I think it's just people that maybe want to stir the pot a little bit and maybe heard that Dan got loud. And now there's going to have to be a y'all kiss and make up moment about it.
Well, who knows? And I don't think Trump was upset in the least that they had gotten to I mean, this is what happens when you get a bunch of type A people wanting to do the right thing and are on the same job. I mean, there's just going to be stuff like that happens. I don't think that is a big deal. And I don't know if Dan in the moment even told somebody like it's her or me, maybe that would have happened. But I think Dan being back is a good sign. I'm glad that the beef, whatever beef, is over. But yeah, it's 100% believable that Dan. I mean, Dan Bongino was one of like the first political voices that I listened to growing up. It was like him and Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, those guys. So after listening to Dan for so many years and listening back to his fight with Dale, like it's like 100%. Yes, I am actually certain that Dan Bongino raised his voice in that meeting. If the meeting went in a way he didn't think was right. But like I said, I think it's a good idea or a good sign that he's back working, and hopefully moving forward that Dan can stay in his position, because I don't think they. I think the administration will be losing a big piece if they lost Dan over something like that. Adam from Athens, by the way, says, in Dan Bongino's defense, who hasn't wanted to yell at Dale? Yeah.
Oh,
and that whole thing was, I wish I was kind of working for Dale at the time when that happened. Now John from Huntsville was wanting to stir the pot. He asked if Dan Bongino would beat Dale on a street fight.
Yes. Sorry. Sorry, you guys. I think Dale would say, I think Dale would hang in there with him. I don't think it would be like a one punch and you're done kind of thing. But I choose the former Secret Service agent to put down the professional wrestling guy. Sorry, Dale.
Jeremy from Madison also says, talking back about the Epstein, or excuse me, the Autopen stuff. He says the victims of all the crimes of the pardoned criminals should be compensated by the Democrat Party. Yeah, that's another piece of it. If these murderers and people on death row were pardoned, but I mean that's bad within itself. But then you find out the president himself didn't even issue the pardon. That's adding insult to injury. So I don't know how you can compensate them and what compensation would be, equivalent to somebody who did something horrible to your family getting off free. And then, I mean, I think the best way to go about it is to prove that the pardon was invalid to begin with, and that they put him back behind bars. I think that's the way to go about it. So let's see, who knows? Jeff from Indiana texted in and said, all you have to do is read Cash Patel and Dan Bongino's faces when they say there's nothing there to know, that they've been told to lie and say that there's nothing there publicly. That's why they feel all the yanks. That was a little bit of a bizarre. Now, I don't think they're lying. However, I think it was a bizarre interview. That interview with was it Maria Bartiromo? I think it was, where Cash and Dan were sitting side by side, and they both said that Epstein did kill himself. Um, I I don't think they lied. It did look though like somebody was holding a gun to their head, like in the background. Like they looked scared almost, and like I don't know. I personally think that's a result of they knew the backlash they were going to get from their own fans because they've been
Yeah.
saying for years that
So I didn't want to interrupt you. I was to say, like, maybe their past comments was the gun being held to their head because they knew what they had said in the past. I can't speak as much for Cash Patel as I can for Dan Bongino, simply because he was on WVNN middays and monitoring the station. I would listen and all that stuff and hear him talk about it. But his comments about it, I think he expected more to be there, more conclusive evidence to be there, that there was something nefarious at play there. But he kind of had to say, hey, this is what it shows. This is it. And that's what you got, a big nothing burger. So I think the uncomfortableness, the feeling like somebody was holding a gun to their head or being mistaken as feeling like they're lying to you, is past comments felt like they were lying to you then
I
when
think,
they got the real truth.
and part of me thinks maybe deep down that, I don't know, who knows, maybe they still have personal beliefs on Epstein, getting murdered, but that the evidence just isn't there, so they can't prove it. So I don't know. It's it's interesting. No, like I said, I don't think they were intentionally lying, but I think their faces did look a little bizarre. But I think it's what you said. I think it's that the fact that they, said all this stuff for years, and now they're in a position, and either they were A, proven wrong, or that B, they don't have the evidence, and now they got to face their fans. Who knows? Well, hopefully in the future, as that report said, we're going to have some more transparency incoming. Either way, though, I think it's a good sign Dan Bongino is back, and then whatever fiery interaction him and Pam Bondi had, I hope that they can move forward. Because, like I said, I don't think Bongino leaving is a good thing for its administration. I want more people like Dan Bongino who are as passionate as he is to get the job done the right way. And I think Trump sees it that way too. But we're going to take a quick time out, folks, and we're going to come back, get into some more of y'all's texts, talking about some more news of the day. While Phil is up in New York City, getting courted by Newsmax and CNN. Y'all make sure to catch him tonight on there. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Like, I remember thinking, my eyes, especially at night when I'd see lights on vehicles, I remember being so blurry, and I thought it's because my eyes were so used to running on night vision all the time that it's almost like the lights are too bright.
Yeah.
I remember telling myself, talking to my wife about it. I'm like, God, do these lights not look star clustered to you? And because your blurriness in your eyes start happening, go to the VA, start the process. SOCOM Care Coalition gets involved because it's not uncommon. Now I definitely can't be a SEAL. I can't go back into the SEAL team's active duty. We're going to let my wife finish nursing school. I was going to go back in and then try to screen for development group again to go to Green Team and go to the East Coast. And the reason I bring that up is because when I left, my chief, who came from Red Squadron Development Group, picked a few of us, and we went out. I remember I borrowed his fins to do the swim in. Passed the test and everything. They had the board out there where they're sitting to do the psychological eval and all that stuff. And I don't know the process anymore, but he told me, he said, Jared, if you stay in, if you stay in, you're going to get a slot in Green Team. You're going to go. You're going to go over to development group.
That was your dream, wasn't it?
Do what?
That was your dream, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I wanted to do. I want to stay and do that. But I was also at a point where my wife had her school paid for here in Birmingham, Alabama. She had been waiting on me a lot. I was jaded about some of the stuff. I didn't like the Obama administration. I mean, there's all the things that anybody deals with, And I was like, okay, I appreciate that, but I really wanted to go home. So that's the choice that I had. And I said, well, I'm also looking at the reserve unit. He said, all I'm telling you is if you stay, because I had enough time on my enlistment to stay and take a slot to Green Team. He said, you're going to take somebody's slot. And that changed how I viewed it. Mm-hmm. He said, so either decide to get out and go reserve or whatever it is you're going to do. He said, or stay and be ready to sign on for another, 4 or 6 years, whatever the requirement was, because you're going to get a slot to Green Team. And I was like, okay. And I talked to my wife about it, and we decided, hey, let's get out. let her finish nursing school. It would only be 2 years. I could do the reserve stuff, and then I would get back in, and we would try to, go to a team for a little while, then screen and go to development group. So that was the process. And so I had all of that. I was selected for development group. It's in the eval paperwork, that I had that. I was top physical performer at Team 3 at the time, right? And it had all my, all of that stuff that I had done, right? Past that screener, which is not hard. It's a 3-mile run, in 22 minutes, and a half-mile ocean swim and whatever, 10 minutes. And I had whatever stuff it was, right? I met all those metrics and superseded those metrics. Done really good at it. And that's what they actually used that against me to say, oh, no, see, this guy, he can perform. He just can't be a SEAL because when you're insulin dependent, you can't jump, you can't dive. Yeah. And so I couldn't be a SEAL. I was like, well, I don't want to be in the regular Navy. And that was kind of the back and forth. So SOCOM Care Coalition assigned an attorney who worked pro bono. He's out of Birmingham, former Marine sniper. I won't use his name. He's asked me not to use his name on the air and stuff, but he's done this for a lot of veterans. Good guy. And he helped take care of me and helped me get my VA, my retirement IDs, my like TRICARE for my family, or I forget what it's called, but it's TRICARE essentially, right? And get all that process, and that was about a year and a half.
Do you have any idea how much of that time when you were still on active duty you might have been toting that type 1 diabetes around with you?
They think at least a year because
Really?
they can do blood work back that far, and to confirm that I had it on active duty. So the way it worked, I could have been in the regular Navy, but I couldn't be a SEAL. You can't be a SOCOM or JSOC operator and be insulin dependent, which I get now. I understand that. I understand why. And so they took me through that process. So even though I was out of active duty as a, like a dishonorable discharge out of active duty, no issues, re-enlistment code, all of that stuff, and I was in the reserve side, everything was good, I could not maintain my SEAL status. So
you said you didn't mean dishonorable discharge.
No, honor. Oh,
honorable
yeah,
discharge.
no, honorable. I'm sorry, not dishonorable discharge. A regular. I was a good discharge.
I don't want
honorable,
that to be recorded.
No. Honorable discharge. It wasn't anything bad. I could re-enlist. Like, I had everything I could do. I just couldn't be a SEAL. So the way it works, I could not retire from naval service, but I could also no longer be a SEAL.
So how is this? I mean, you're obviously still a pretty robust dude. I mean, you're still working out. You're still living large. You're still doing law enforcement stuff.
Yeah.
How is that physical situation impacted your life?
I mean, it's not obviously impact. I got these stupid insulin pumps and stuff on my, which is pretty amazing. It's funny going in. You see the guys without legs and stuff with prosthetics and everything. I had testicular cancer, and I have a prosthetic, nuts. And my buddies say you're one nut from a Princess Warrior.
You do?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And we are back, folks. This is JP here, filling in live for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. Yeah, once again, folks, Phil will be on Newsmax tonight, 6:20 and 7 o'clock Central, will be 2 separate appearances. And then he'll be on CNN at 9 o'clock Central, where he'll be in the Scott Jennings seat on there with a conservative voice surrounded by liberals. So make sure to stay tuned and tune in for that. But also, I got to make another announcement. There's tomorrow night, 6 o'clock p.m., we will be releasing another Just Right podcast, a long-form podcast with Phil, interviewing various guests. Tomorrow is with Brian Dawson with 1819 News, who has an incredible story, facing life in prison, then coming to Christ and leading a successful life as he is now. So make sure to stay tuned for that. That's 6 o'clock tomorrow night, live premiere on YouTube. Y'all make sure to check it out then. Let's see. We got some more texts that coming in. Barry from Athens says Dan Bongino's health would be his obstacle. Okay, so now we got people talking about a fight between Dale and Dan.
Oh, yeah?
From Athens, or Huntsville. Says Dan Bongino's health would be his obstacle in a physical altercation between Dale and Dan. His arms are not in very good shape. Well, so there's that, I guess. I don't know how he knows his arms aren't in very good shape. But there you go. John from Huntsville also said, what would Dale Jackson do if he was invited to go on CNN with Phil tonight? I don't know. I'm sure that he would be his just normal Dale self. Actually, I feel like he's been on CNN before on a panel. He's mentioned, I don't know, that'd be very interesting though, to say the least. Hey, real quick, we've been talking about the Autopen and then the Epstein debacle and all that. There's another big story in the headlines today, and Phil and I talked about it briefly. But Trump is now ramping up his attack on Putin because, according to him, Putin is not playing very nice, and he's continuing to attack Ukrainian cities and bombing neighborhoods and such. And so Trump has now given Putin an ultimatum. He's given him 50 days to come to a peace agreement with Ukraine, or there will be 100% sanctions on Russia. But also, and then I think this is a genius move by Trump, he is now giving Ukraine a ton of weapons, more weapons than Biden even gave him in terms of Patriot missiles, which is, self-defense equipment. But he's given it through NATO. So he's selling the weapons through NATO, which is money coming to the U.S. And then NATO is then doing the distribution to Ukraine. So it's no money out of the taxpayer's pocket. Ukraine's getting the weapons. And it's, like I said, it's not out of cost of the American taxpayer. It's, coming from NATO. Now it's, I think the larger argument of, granted, that is a genius way to go about it to save the taxpayer, money. But I think the bigger, question is okay, is us continuing to be involved in this war helping it come to an end? Is it helping prolong it? And should we be involved in this war at all? Should we just pull out altogether? I had my own thoughts on it. I was very critical of the Biden administration's handling of that war, simply because there was no off ramp and they were tying America to the side of Ukraine till the very end, to the last Ukrainian. And I think that was an unnecessary way to go about it. If we're going to give Ukraine weapons, I think this is the way to do it. Do it in the most cost efficient way to the U.S. taxpayer. And, hopefully this pressure will, pressure Putin to put an end to this war. So I'm holding faith in President Trump with this. He's a great negotiator. We've seen it, countless times in his presidency, that this will bring Putin to the table, bring him to his knees, and make him stop doing what he's doing. However, if we come to the point of 50 days and it's not working, then the sanctions, just keep the snowball going and it actually provokes Russia even more, then we can have a different conversation. But as of now, I trust President Trump to use his negotiation skills to bring this conflict to an end. And, I think this is the best way to do it. I'm not too crazy about continuing to, be involved in a foreign war. But if we're going to, I think this is the best way to go about it. Bring in money to the U.S. and force NATO to do its part and distribute the weapons themselves. So we'll see if this actually has an effect and brings Putin to the table. But I think, and Phil mentioned this earlier when he was on, that Putin cannot afford 100% sanctions from the U.S. I mean, I don't, his economy is just not in a place where they can afford it.
So he says. So Trump says, we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if they don't have a deal in 50 days, talking about if Russia and Ukraine is not resolved in 50 days with a peace deal. He calls them secondary tariffs, and he says they'll be 100%.
Yeah, and I think that's smart. Like I said, people are gonna, I'm already seeing Steve from Madison saying that so much for this war will be done in 24 hours. Here we are on 3 different conflicts around the world in a month. Not what I was sold. I agree that's not what we were sold. I do think Trump underestimated quite a bit how difficult it would be to end the war. And granted, I mean, obviously that's Trump talk. I can end this war in 24 hours. Okay. I'm not necessarily holding him to that standard. However, I agree. I share that, resentment a little bit of, I'm tired of being entangled in these foreign conflicts. I'm not going to jump to that conclusion yet of, throwing my hands up and, saying this is not what I voted for. I'm going to give a little bit of time for this to, hopefully work. But I do agree. I do think a lot of people share that, resentment of, look, you told us we were going to stop being involved in these wars and we're continuing to be involved. I get it. And I share a bit of that resentment. But I would just give it a little bit of time. Give it a little bit of time. See if these, secondary tariffs work and if the ultimatum works, and then come to your conclusion then. Hopefully this can stop. People can stop dying, and Trump can be the peacemaker that he's trying to be. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, continue to discuss this, and get into y'all's texts. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
That came from something in the teens, but I was already at that when they found that, I was already had all my 100% VA, retirement IDs, all that stuff. So there was nothing else to gain, but I still had to go and have that surgery and go through that process.
Wow.
But so I have prosthetic there, and these two things are considered prosthetics in the VA because it's a prosthetic pancreas, an insulin pump, and a blood sugar thing, and it runs to my, runs to my phone right here. So you can see, like, it's pretty cool what we have, to take care of it. See, it runs my blood sugar on my phone right there, so it runs that. My insulin pump, is another app on the phone that hey, deliver insulin as I need it. And so these are considered prosthetics because they're outside of normal.
Kidding.
Yeah, so I'm in there, and you're looking at dudes that don't have 2 legs, and I'm like, I got more prosthetics than you, bro. He's sitting there without legs, and so it's so it has impacted because
one nut in a pump.
One nut in a pump, man. I mean, that's it, dude. So I say all that to say it has impacted, how I live my life. I can't deploy like I used to, like even contract work. I couldn't be a federal agent at the time. Now I'm a federal TFO with Homeland Security, but I couldn't be a full-bore federal agent because I was looking to get picked up by the U.S. Marshal Service when all this happened and rolled out, but you couldn't be insulin dependent. I think they've changed that now where it's okay, but it did limit tremendously what I could do.
So being straight up about it, I mean, knowing how you've lived and the way you've lived, I mean, was there any bitterness? You ever question God on it?
No, not for this. No, I never questioned God on this. I mean, it's my honest opinion. If I would have lasted, and me and my wife talk about this and laugh because she probably would have been in the same boat. Her school was paid for. Her nursing school was paid for here. I would have lasted about 6 months out of the SEAL teams, and I would have jumped right back in, and I would have, probably hit a deployment and gone over and screened and tried to go to development group. Now, I might not have made it through Green Team, and I was a sniper school instructor when I got out, so I was selected for sniper school and even checked in with Monty over there. Monty LeClaire was the chief at the time, and that was about the time I got out and all this happened right then. So I could have gone back to sniper school as an instructor. Like I probably wouldn't have made it 6 months. And would have been back in the SEAL teams.
So I'll be honest with you. I think you just said a ton to people who might be watching this that have setbacks.
Yeah.
I think without meaning to, you literally said a ton to people. But if you had to like turn and face somebody who's facing setbacks and say, here's how I view things, what would you say?
The Lord just used that to keep me out of what my natural inclination was because He had a different route for me. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's what me and my wife believe. Mm-hmm. I would have been back in the teams. She would have been here going through school. We would have been apart. We wouldn't have had we had a miscarriage on our first child, and then we wouldn't have had our second child. So we wouldn't have had either of those that we dealt with. We wouldn't have met the people that we met. Our life would look different, and I very well could have been in I could have been with any number of my buddies who have died between now and me being out. Now we look at that, and I would gladly take their place. Don't get me wrong on that. I would take any of my buddies' place who have died, but my wife might not be as willing to give me up. My daughter's definitely not, and so it would have changed our life tremendously.
There was a song that just reminds me. I'm chasing a rabbit again briefly, but there was a song that came out. Amy Grant, one of the early leaders of contemporary Christian music, she had a song called "Angels Watching Over Me," and it was all about the things you can't see them happening, and you have no idea they happened to prevent the things that could have happened.
Yeah,
and like the reckless car that ran out of gas before it came my way is one of the lines in the song.
Or I would have. Let's say I would have stayed in. Let's say I would have stayed in, and I would have gone over to Green Team and gone through it. There's a good chance that this untreated, what I had untreated,
that's right,
would have shown up in the strenuous
in the worst places.
6 months.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back, folks. This is JP here on Rightside Radio, filling in for Phil while he's up in New York City. And we're at Rightside Radio.
And let me just say, JP did see the Pace Picante thing.
And once again, folks, yep, Phil is up in New York City. He's going to be on Newsmax tonight, 6:20, 7 o'clock Central Time. Y'all want to check him out there. And then he'll be on CNN at 9 o'clock Central. So y'all make sure to see Phil up and outnumbered by the panel on CNN. This is the one where Scott Jennings is on and gets all his sound bites for him. So look forward to see Phil on those shows today, and make sure you check it out as well. But also one more quick announcement. I mentioned it earlier, but tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, we have another long form podcast coming out. This one is with Brian Dawson from 1819 News, who has an amazing story himself. It'll be live on YouTube, 6 o'clock tomorrow night. Y'all check it out. It will be live premiere then. And then I'll also be on the audio podcast as well, the same audio podcast channel where you can find this show every day on podcast. So y'all make sure to check it out there. And back to this Russia-Ukraine story a little bit. It is crazy to me how Trump is able to play both sides of the fence, because I don't know about you, Emily, but I feel like the Trump Zelensky spat in the Oval Office is one of the craziest presidential events we've ever seen and will ever see. I don't think we've ever seen a foreign leader get reprimanded in front of the press that badly as Zelensky was, especially one that was propped up as much as the Biden administration propped him up and gave him money. For him to get reprimanded so badly in the Oval Office, that was just something I think is good. I mean, the picture of, Vance and Trump going at it with Zelensky itself is that was a historical event. Whether you like it or not, that was just something we've never seen before. But
yeah, I was going to say unpopular opinion here, but I wish that would have been behind closed doors.
I think that's fair. And, whatever you think about it, I would agree with some of that resentment. However, I do appreciate that Zelensky was told that. I do think he came in with the wrong attitude. Yeah, but I do agree with it with the not doing it in public as much.
I think I'm the old school, we're going to have, our gentlemanly discussion behind closed doors. Like we'll have our gentleman face on, greeting the public and being diplomatic and things like that. But then when we get behind closed doors, that's where we're really going to hash this out, where we have no outside interference. We don't have anybody speculating anything, sticking their nose into the situation or posting photos of uncomfortable moments that spur national feelings one way or another. I don't know. And I'm also a big believer in, I guess it's like the Matthew 18 rule of stuff, where if you have a problem with somebody, it's a one-on-one thing. Mm-hmm. And if that problem doesn't resolve, you bring in a mediator, and then you work on it. Then if it doesn't do that, then like you essentially take it to your counsel or whatever. So I feel like the issue that they had with Zelensky, that they have with Ukraine, that they have with the whole situation, that should have first started off behind closed doors, one-on-one. You guys hash it out, get to the bottom of what you're going to do, move forward from there. I don't think we all needed to be involved in it, but like I said, that's a pretty unpopular opinion for me to hold.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that actually hold that opinion. I think there's a big part of the right wing movement that was, very anti-interventionist and anti, have a very, some would say isolationist. I think it's more of an anti-interventionist of we just don't want to get entangled in any foreign wars. I think that was sort of the group that was happy to see him publicly reprimanded. But I think that those, reservations are fair. But I also think it's amazing that, Trump is able to give that sort of, he's not playing one side of the fence. I guarantee you, if Putin was sitting in the Oval Office, Trump would give him a very similar reprimanding over him continuing to bomb, Ukraine neighborhoods. I mean, he's given him the reprimanding to the press every day, it seems. And now we've got this, 100% sanctions in 50 days, and the continuing to fund Ukraine. That is, that clearly shows that Trump is not playing one side of the fence here. He's clearly trying to put an end to the conflict. But I just think that's fascinating to me how his ability to play both sides like that is. People are claiming he was a Russia agent. He was a Putin apologist. Putin helped him win in the 2016 election, which we all know is a hoax now. But I think this proves that Trump's being fair and he plays both sides, and whichever side is inhibiting or getting in the way of the conflict to come to an end, I think he's going to put pressure on that person very publicly. So, we'll see if Putin comes to the table, if this, the threat of sanctions and Trump continuing to fund Ukraine, has an effect on him at all, and if this helps him bring just the bottom line, I want this conflict to come to an end soon. I agree with Trump. I'm tired of seeing people die in this, and I think there's a lot of vested interests in this war. With NATO, the U.S., and I think it's just it'd be the world would be a much better place if this threat just ended altogether. But I think the way Trump's playing both sides of it, we'll see if this threat of sanctions works. But to the resentment, like Steve from Madison was texting earlier about, I thought we were going to be done in these wars. I agree, but also, there needs to be an off-ramp process, and the presidents themselves, Zelensky and Putin, are going to have to want to come to an end themselves. We can only bring a horse to water. They're going to have to bring this war to an end itself. So we'll see if it works. But I would hold off on the throwing up your hands up, getting upset about it just yet. But it is fascinating though. Trump, the public, whether you like it or not, the public foreign policy. I don't know, that may add an extra effect on things. If Putin is getting, humiliated on the public stage like he kind of is right now by President Trump, does that force him to ramp it up, or does he, back off and cower down? It's a big power play here, I think, between Trump and Putin. But I think Trump has the leverage and he has the ability to put that hurt on his economy. And the other aspect is, if Russia sees that, oh man, stuff is going to get a lot harder here in Russia with these sanctions and Putin is not letting up, Putin cares about his public opinion greatly. Russia is in a position where the public opinion does matter to a certain extent. You can talk about the effect on elections, if they're actually fair elections, which I think all that's fair. But the public opinion has a big role in Putin, having the effect that he has on his own people. If he's going to keep selling this war to his people to keep going through the meat grinder, but now the Russian people are seeing, wait a second, if you don't stop, we're about to get 100%, sanctions. That's going to hurt my pocket. That's going to hurt me. Putin could have his own people starting to turn against him because they see how Trump is threatening and these sanctions, and Putin's not stopping after what? How long has this war been going on? For 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
It's, that could have an extra effect. It being so public like that could have an extra effect on, the Russian people seeing like, look, Trump's trying to put an end to this, and it's your own president that continues to bomb cities. So who knows? But regardless, it is fascinating to see the foreign policy being played in front of the public's eyes. What it has an effect, that's for sure. I mean, whether you think it's a good one or not. I mean, Zelensky after that changed his demeanor a little bit. Whether you think that's good or bad, it certainly has an effect. And there will never be another president that does it like that, I don't think, so outwardly and publicly. So we'll see if it has the effect that President Trump desires. Lynn from Tanner says, I honestly believe that President Trump should take Zelensky and Putin to an undisclosed area, put boxing gloves on them, and let them fight it out. Okay. They're both incredibly hard-headed men, full of pride.
Get it out, you guys.
Yeah. Videotape it too. See who wins. Whoever wins the fight wins the war, I guess. They're both incredibly hard-headed men, full of pride. Neither one will back down. It is not in their DNA to back down. I think that's fair. And also, it's important to note, too, Trump pointed this out today. This is not a Trump war. This is very much a Biden entanglement, that there were many off-ramps the Biden administration could have taken to help bring this to an end. I mean, shortly after the war even started, there was a peace treaty proposed, and then Boris Johnson went over there and shot it down on behalf of the United States. And then the United States continued to give them endless funding to the last Ukrainian, they said. And it was just, whatever you think about the war, continuing to give U.S. money without any end in sight, or even trying to bring an end to the war, just continuing to put the meat grinder on, I think that caused it to become such a tough and entangled knot that it is right now, that Trump is trying to untangle. But it's not an easy one to untangle. I think Trump saying he would have it done in 24 hours was a bit of an understatement or underestimation on how hard that would be. But nonetheless, I won't put the blame on Trump on this. I would put the blame on the Biden administration. Anthony Blinken, who I think was one of the big masterminds of, you talk about Biden being a lame duck president. I think Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, was one of the key players, not just in foreign policy, but all the decision made. So I think he is one of the people chief responsible for letting this foreign war get to the entanglement that it is. Trump is doing his best to untangle it. So I think it's important to, I understand people getting upset, that this isn't over yet. And I would agree, I'm rather annoyed, but I would put the blame not only on Putin and Zelensky, but also on the Biden administration of the mess that they left President Trump to clean up. It's only been 6 months into the first, Trump's second term. So there's, still some time to work things out. But I think the day of reckoning is coming. I think the 50-day, deadline that Trump gave Putin, that I think that's the day of reckoning. 50 days, if this nonsense continues, then enough's enough. And Putin's going to have to feel the sanctions and the weapons to Ukraine. It's just, bottom line is, I want to see the end to this, and I hope Trump's negotiating tactics work. Of doing it out in the open, playing both sides of the fence. But then you have to ask yourself, when's enough, and when do we just pull out altogether? Like, when do we get a certain point where it's like, okay, well, these guys are going to just fight to the end of the end of eternity, I guess, and then we're out, we're done, we've done all we can do. Let's focus on stuff on the home front. Part of me thinks that we may be at that point already, but I'll give Trump his 50-day, period. But how long before Trump says, all right, enough's enough? We got stuff on the home front that's way more important than, trying to end this war between these two, countries in Europe. Enough's enough. We're pulling out. We're coming home. I wonder if, how long do you think that is, Emily? Do you think it's a year, 2 years, or is it going to be 50 days?
That's the thing about Trump, is he's a wild card. Mm-hmm. If he sees, and this is stuff that may happen behind the scenes that we're not privy to, if he sees some kind of movement in the next 50 days, if he sees some promising things happen, but yet he still needs to do stricter tariffs or whatever he wants to do, sanctions, so on and so forth, then he may go ahead with that because he's seen some positive change, some movement towards the end. But if it's like it is today, if it's fired up Trump, he's not seeing any movement. I think he said, Putin says one thing during the day, but then at night he sends bombs and missiles. If it's still that Putin, then we're still going to have this Trump. And I think that it's going to escalate from there.
We'll see. All I know is pray for peace, because this has gone on way too long. But hopefully, like I said, 50 days, if stuff starts to, come to an end, then I think Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. But we'll just see. We're going to take a quick time out. We're going to come back to end the show on this Meatloaf Monday. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Selection process at Green Team, and it could have killed me. I mean, I could have. It would have been one of those things where you push through it, and you never get seen, you don't know what's going on, and you wind up dying because of it. Just on the training side. So again, I don't know what happened, why it happened, but whatever's going on in your life, is it God directing you in a certain place? But then there's the other aspect of it. A lot of issues we have ain't got nothing to do with God. It's got to do with us doing the opposite of what God wants us to do, and that could be it as well.
All right, let's move into current day. So you get out, and I see both your businesses. You got the Shooting Institute and you got Covenant Rescue Group. Mm-hmm. The Shooting Institute, I can look at it on paper and go, dude's got transferable skills. I mean, he comes off active duty to the teams, doing the things he did, and now he's training other people to do the things that his hard skills translate into pretty easily on the civilian side. Mm-hmm. And then there's Covenant Rescue Group. And you guys are doing an amazing amount of interdiction work and training law enforcement to interdict sexual offenders and traffickers and that kind of stuff. You talk about both of them, but I really too, I want to get down to, how did Covenant Rescue Group happen? Whose idea? Whose mission mindset was that one to say we're going to do something in that arena?
It was probably my wife's more than anybody's, but the Shooting Institute started actually before I got out, and it's going through all this stuff. Me and a buddy of mine out of Indiana, Troy D. Hart, I mentioned him earlier. We started the Shooting Institute, and together, and he kind of ran it, and then the business became what it was when I got out. And the Lord blessed and grew. Did law enforcement training, then started doing DOD contracts, learned how to write DOD contracts, finished my MBA online kind of during that time frame. learned how to write contracts, met a bunch of people, met a guy named Ed Acosta out of UAB who helped me write contracts and obtain some of my first prime contracts to the government, did a lot of subcontracts to JSOC and for the enablers that were supporting Delta and SEALs. And then finally I got picked up for a few special forces units, just continued to grow. Like it wasn't just like, hey, we're doing some civilian classes. It went from a few civilian classes all the way into now I'm back and doing training for the SEAL teams. A buddy of mine from SEAL Team 4 hit me up the other day, say, hey, can you run a concealed carry course for us if we bring you up sometime middle of the summer, depending on what funding looks like. So I say that to say the Lord just opened the doors and blessed TSI, and we were doing really well. The TSI, the Shooting Institute, started doing security stuff. DB8 is the Security Institute because they didn't like the word shooting in a lot of it with these schools and all. So we would write reports for schools. We would write reports for churches. We would look at their insurance policy, talk with insurance agents, get a riders on their policy to cover whatever exposures they had. You're familiar with some of that stuff with what you've done as an attorney. So a lot of it wasn't even the skill set that transferred over. It's just something we learned to do, something I learned to do in my MBA, write reports, and just started doing that with different schools and different organizations. And in that process, somehow got involved with anti-human trafficking work with Operation Underground Railroad, and from there did some work with them. From there, got involved in some more anti-human trafficking work with a ministry called Far Reaching Ministries, run by Wes Bentley out in California. And finally, my wife said, we had people just giving us money. I mean, like literally, when I say I got guys writing us checks for $10,000, $15,000, $5,000, and I was like, what do I do with this money these guys do? I give them an invoice for it from TSI? So I took it to my CPA. He said, y'all need to start a nonprofit.
Nonprofit, yeah.
My wife's heart was for it. She says, if I'm going to let you leave to do anything, this is what I want you leaving to go do. Because I still had options to go back to the agency to do work with them, the DIA or the CIA, different opportunities that presented themselves. Went and interviewed for a job up in D.C., and they said, hey, if you're willing to move here, you've got the position. To be a blue badger, I guess is what they call them. And my wife was adamantly against moving to the D.C. area. So we just kind of stayed the course on what we're doing. The Lord opened the doors and said, if you're going to leave, if you're going to do these deployments and stuff again or go to different places, I'm down for this. We had kids at the time. And so that's kind of what got us into starting the nonprofit.
So both businesses still run concurrently?
Oh, they still run? Yes, sir, they do. They still run concurrently, yeah.
And do they compete with each other on a regular basis?
No, not at all, because, CRG was born out of TSI.
Okay.
Because we had to use TSI to fund it and do a lot of the work. Now CRG could probably run on its own, but the for-profit company, we have a lot of licenses and a lot of stuff that CRG uses that CRG can't have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Still maintain my law enforcement credentials at the time, and then we somehow tapped into stateside work, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And that was because of COVID in 2020 arena. Covenant Rescue Group's
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid conservative, just plain right. And one more reminder, folks, tonight, 6:20, 7 o'clock on Newsmax. Phil will be on there, but then he'll also be on CNN at 9 o'clock. So make sure to tune in and see him outnumbered on the CNN panel. But in the meantime, we still got our regular truck driving friend, Jeff from Indiana, calling in. Jeff, how you doing, my friend?
I'm on the right side of Nashville. That's all that matters.
That is all that matters. It's
Yes,
all
it
downhill.
is.
It's all downhill from here, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Well, I probably just
But,
jinxed you though, that there's something past Nashville, God forbid.
Yeah.
Hey, by
But,
the way, how'd you get that truck or that tire fixed yesterday? That seemed pretty brutal. Or was it Friday?
About 3 hours. Yeah, 3 hours worth of waiting. Basically, I had to. They get tire service comes out and they throw me a new tire on there and aired it up and down the road I went.
Jeez.
Unfortunately, you got to wait your turn when you're out on the road like that, and if they got anybody in front of you, you may sit there for hours. So, and so that's the way it goes.
That's just the way it goes, I guess. Hey, what do you think about what all we talked about today?
Did I lose you?
Oh, I may have lost you. Jeff Bro, can you hear me? I don't think so. We may have lost Jeff Rowe there. Let's see if I can try to get him back. In the meantime, though, we do have the grades that are in.
Ready to connect. Click connect to show now. Connected as the host.
A double plus for his nearly
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface.
Triple plus for her spot on comments. I know if Emily was still on here that she would appreciate that. But here, let's see. I think we got Jeff back. Jeff, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right,
I lost
cool.
the feed there.
There you go. So what do you think about all the stuff we talked about today, Jeff Rowe?
Well, the as far as the Biden commuting the murder, the people on death row sentences, he just commuted their death sentence. They're still in prison. They just got life sentences now.
That's true. Yeah. That whole debacle was a mess. I think that's a massive scandal.
Yeah. It's. I think this Autopen stuff and everything. You should have to, if the president can't sign something and has to use the Autopen for whatever necessary arrangements, there has to be a paper trail. He needs to sign something wherever he's at so that it says, I gave authority for this to happen. And, because otherwise anybody could just do this again. They just say, well, yeah, you did. And the president can say, no, I didn't. Well, no, you're not of sound mind. I'm sorry, but you did.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even know.
Well, I think that's exactly it. I think this has to be accountable. People have to be held accountable for this, or else it will happen again. And I don't. The Autopen itself, if there's evidence that the president actually, gave authority to use the Autopen individually, then that's one thing. But I do think you're right. There has to be evidence, a paper trail of some sort that prove that the president gave individual authority to sign certain, pardons. Whether they use the Autopen or not, there has to be proof that individual. You can't say, "Oh yeah, y'all can sign whatever pardons you want." I mean that should definitely not be allowed, and that they have to treat this harshly, unless it will happen again.
Yeah, well, I mean, Biden wasn't in charge of anything. I mean, even the Easter Bunny was giving him orders, so I mean,
yeah.
we were in for a small time by the Easter Bunny. It's like, no, shut your mouth and get back in the White House because you're not supposed to talk to these people. It's like he always said, he'd come out there and ask the questions and everything and go, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. Told me not to do this, so he was just doing as he was told. He didn't lead anything basically. So
I wonder if that was Anthony Blinken in the Easter Bunny suit. Somebody like that. Anthony Blinken, Jill Biden, maybe. Yeah, it was somebody like that.
Yeah, but I'm kind of disappointed in Phil.
Why is that?
Well, going on CNN tonight, I told him earlier that it was kind of unsportsmanlike behavior because it's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel with a 50 cal. I mean, they're completely unarmed and
yeah,
they're not going to be able to answer a question.
Yeah, that's true. I'm curious to see because if you've seen Scott Jennings, they put some crazy liberals up against him a lot of the time. I wonder what kind of caliber of liberal Phil's going to be dealing with on CNN there. It could be quite entertaining.
One gal from the one girl's from The View, I think. So
That's
know
true.
how much intelligence is on. There's not a brain cell be shared between all of them.
No, that's true. I forgot he mentioned the Phil or the View lady is going to be on there. Man, that's going to be must-watch TV for sure. Well, hey man, the music is about to play. Anything else before we head out?
Oh, that's about it. Then everybody have a good one and watch Phil tonight because I sure will be.
For sure. Appreciate you calling, Jeff Rowe. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
See ya. All right, folks. Appreciate you guys tuning in today for this fill-in. Like I said, Jeff Poor will have the show tomorrow while Phil is flying back from New York. But in the meantime, just keep this in mind. There's always more than us than there are of them. God is still on his throne, and y'all stay in the fight, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.